This is the Vision 79 podcast, where my friend Sander and myself, Mason, discuss recent developments in our business and personal growth. The name Vision 79 comes from our respective racing numbers. Sanders is 40, mine is 39, and we have a similar ambition to progress in business and personal growth. Many successful people have started small, just like us, but very few of them have documented their early years. They often say they wish they had, and given we believe in learning lessons from others, we intend to be the first to document our journey from start to finish. Today, we'll discuss why making tough decisions can be difficult, how to handle the situation correctly, how to be sure you aren't rushing your decisions, and more. But first, we like to start each episode with a brief update of where we're at in our business and personal lives so that when we go back and re listen to these episodes in the future, we can kind of gauge where we're at. And in the last episode, I said that the next episode would be after the first Formula One race. And as soon as we stopped recording, we went to schedule the next one and realized that it's spring break at Florida Tech and we can't record here while they're closed.
So that's during the week.
So Formula One hasn't started yet, so I'm a bit down.
I'm sorry for
But
your loss.
what's your 2-day business update? We're recording on Wednesday and we did our last one on Sunday. So what's your 3-day business update?
2. I haven't done anything today. Besides work.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, I went to work.
I guess that's true. Yeah,
Had dinner and then came here. So
I got a little bit done.
I mean, I did a little bit, but it wasn't much.
Just ate goldfish on the couch.
I responded to some emails.
Yeah.
I got a Karen customer who inputted their shipping address wrong, and then literally 3 weeks later, after they placed the order, was like, "Hey, I input my shipping address wrong."
That's good.
And then now she's ranting and rambling because she wants me to resend her a new one.
Yeah.
Because she input the address wrong.
Are you doing the customer's always right, like just give them what they want thing, or are you arguing with her?
No.
Okay.
What?
I said, or are you arguing with her?
I don't argue.
Just tell her to fuck herself.
I just don't respond. No. There's a certain strategy you use where, first off, I don't respond as Sander tech support. I respond as Jennifer customer support because women tend to have better luck dealing with customers than men do. And so I have an alias. My name is Jennifer. That's the first thing.
That's smart. And you escalate it. So like next time you're going to CC Jennifer's manager and then like.
Right. And then I have a signature from Melissa, who's the manager.
Yeah.
So
Melissa, the manager.
Not literally. I don't sign it Melissa, the manager.
I mean, okay.
Her name's Melissa.
The manager.
The manager. It makes it easy in my head because it's like Jennifer, job, Melissa, manager,
Chidori, tech support.
Yes, exactly. But essentially you have a strategy where if the customer just doesn't like or if the product's broken, my fulfillment supplier will send them a free one complimentary. So no issues there. If it's lost in shipping, same story. If they input the wrong address, I can either send them a new one, and then when the other one gets back to the warehouse, I can select that, have that one transferred to another order.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can wait for the one that they're sending back that wasn't able to be delivered right now to the warehouse and then send her that exact one when it gets back to the warehouse.
It'll just return to sender, assuming?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So right now it's in the process of returning to sender.
Unless the person that received it kept it, or did they not?
They didn't because they input an address that was invalid. So the delivery was never able to take place.
Maybe she's one of the people who voted for Biden in 2020.
Probably.
Maybe she lives
Sounds
on
like
a non-real address. That's what she had to ship to.
But yes,
Don, we figured it out.
She's collecting all of the Social Security money from the United States.
Yeah.
But those are my options there. In terms of like if someone doesn't like the product, there's a certain escalation process that you go through where you offer them a 20% refund first and a 30% refund.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a certain strategy you use where like in your return policy, you require return shipment for the product, but you always choose a warehouse to return that is outside of the country that they currently live in.
Got it.
And then you essentially use Google Maps to get a random warehouse address so that if they Google it, it actually pulls up as a warehouse address. But the goal is essentially to have their responsibility for return shipping to be higher than the cost of the product.
Right.
That way they are incentivized to just take a partial refund, which is what we're offering. And essentially you have like an escalation period of like an email template that you use to go through that process. But I haven't had to do that yet.
Oh, got it. Because you just sent an email back and you were like, hey.
Right now it's only been either product was damaged in shipping, or this is my first instance of address was input
Right.
incorrectly upon checkout.
Right.
So I haven't had to deal one with where it was like, "Oh, I got blue, but I actually want yellow, blah, blah, blah."
Right.
Right? I haven't had to
I
do that.
put in the number. I fucked up.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Um,
Isn't it crazy? It's so crazy to be like, I fucked up. You should fix it.
yeah,
Fucking
that is wild, but that's kinda like the general mentality of the populace. It's always like point the finger at the other person.
Yeah. And it's not like a the customer's always right thing, because in this case, the customer expressly asked for something and the customer asks wrong.
Right.
So it's like,
Yeah, it's, yeah, people always wanna blame the problems on someone.
this is your IT support representative. Have you considered fucking yourself?
Before I left, I saw her email, and she was like, "What are you gonna do about this issue? Are you gonna send me a new one?" And out loud, I said, "I'm just gonna lock my computer." I went, "Aching," and I left the fucking room.
That's so funny, dude. Yeah. If they were experiencing like something out of their control, I would have some empathy, but like you fucked up. And like you
Yeah,
fucked up an address. Well,
yeah.
could you see the difference between, is it totally different or is it like one digit off?
Um, it was input in a weird format, but that wasn't the problem. They also dropped the apartment number completely on their input.
So it was the right apartment complex, but they just didn't put the apartment unit.
Yes, correct,
Got it. So
correct.
it was a slip up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's like, you should be I mean, in my opinion, if you're buying a product, you should be making sure that you input the address correctly.
Yep.
Like if I lived in an apartment complex and I didn't input the apartment,
Yeah.
then like and it never got to me, I would
Yeah.
be like, well, I didn't
You know,
input the fucking apartment, so
Grace's old apartment complex tried to charge her damages. Apartment complexes, and I learned this from your real estate course, if they want to claim your security deposit, they have 30 days to let you know, right?
Mhm.
And they have to let you know via email, physical mail, or like some written communication, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Grace never got anything. Recently, she had a credit hit because a $700 security deposit fee from her last apartment complex went to collections. And she was like, I never received anything. She called the apartment complex. She got it hunted down. They did send her a letter in the mail. Do you know where they sent it?
Wrong address or her
The
old
apartment,
apartment address.
the new apartment, no unit number.
Oh,
Even though Grace had given them her new apartment
yeah.
and unit number for to
That's on
fulfill
them.
things. That's on them.
Yeah.
So now we're going through the process of telling collections to fuck themselves because we were never properly notified. So we will not be paying and our credit should be fixed.
Yeah.
But it's that exact thing, right?
Yeah, there's this comedian online who goes through this credit trick, and he's like, essentially, it's credit card companies are obligated to respond to you within, I think it's 21 days or
Okay.
3 business weeks. If they're not able to, then they have to grant your request.
Interesting.
And so he was like, the trick is tank your credit throughout the entire year, and then like December 15th. Put in a request. Everyone's on break for Christmas. Everyone's swam. No one will get to it. Everyone gets back from the new year. It's been 3 weeks, and your credit is brand new. It's so fucking funny. I never looked into it if it was true or not, but it's fucking funny.
There's only one way to find out.
Yeah.
2025 is going to get real spicy.
I'm already working on the credit part. I'll start in for December. But
That's so funny.
past couple of days, been running some new test ads in my ad sets. Just watching them, seeing if they're going to scale or not. Additionally, been working on going through my ad course notes and organizing and cleaning them up. It's now a 50-page document that I cleaned up and organized and highlighted all the essential parts. So probably this weekend I'll make a summary version of that sheet. Because what I've been doing right now is when I go through courses or notes, I take a bunch and then I highlight the individual line items that are like uber important.
Yeah.
Then I take those and I summarize them into a 2-page sheet, and then I print that out single-sided and tape it to my wall.
Yeah.
And so I tape papers on my wall that I can like easily reference above me or look at or whatever. So
That's
that
like
helps.
it's like a paranoid schizophrenic Unabomber
Yeah.
way of what I did with the real estate course. So at the end of each course, you have like a 1-page summary of notes. And then what I did was I downloaded the 1-page summaries in a PDF, and then all like whatever 300 pages of notes as a PDF. And then I gave both to ChatGPT, and I said, using the unit summaries and the thing, spit me out a study guide to learn all this shit.
Yeah.
And then it like, brrr, you know.
Yeah,
But
I've been using ChatGPT for some of it. The thing is that I found if I give it like a 30 or 40 page doc, the response window is limited.
Yep.
And so it'll try to fit in the summary of that 30, 40 page doc in that response window.
Yeah.
And so I have to break it down by section for it to respond to within the PDF.
Yeah.
And then at that point, I've found like sometimes it pulls something that it thinks is important, but I know based on a different reference elsewhere in the PDF is not as important as the thing it left out. And so I've just been doing it manually for now.
I told it to give me the maximum gun to your head top 5 bullet points from each unit that I absolutely have to know for the state exam, and that's what it did.
Nice.
But yeah, yeah,
But you know, that's been good.
same thing.
Going through those, cleaning up those course notes. And I also have a research document that was all research for my products, and I have like 40 different hook lines, like a bunch of different message points, desires, benefits, features, personas that I'm targeting, like a whole bunch of shit that I've just done through research. And I'm cleaning that up and breaking it down by type. And then I'm commenting on the ones that I want to try next and how they connect through. And then I have a brief document that I'm referencing that to. And then in the brief doc, it's essentially what a script are you running, like voiceover, if you're running a voiceover script, what's your primary text on the ad, like your main description text, and then what's your headline that you're using. And so I keep a reference doc like that then ties to a learning document that I have where I record what worked and why, what failed and why, and then that's how I iterate for how I change my ads through time.
Got it.
So it's like, you know, a bunch of different stuff tied together. It sounds convoluted, but it flows pretty well when you have it all laid out.
Well, it sounds like the research information, like the research variables inform like a success matrix. Then you just
But that's pretty much what it is.
yeah,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah. So just been working on that. I worked on that last night. And that's about it. Sounds like a few items, but they were pretty lengthy. So
Got it.
just doing that stuff.
Got it.
So and work, regular work.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
what about you? What you got?
I didn't do shit.
No?
No, really? I got a lot. I have a significant
surprised.
amount for as short as it's been. Yeah. So I left off building a list of inspectors. I modified that to include referrals
Mm-hmm.
because I want to have a long list. If a client is like, I don't know anything about inspectors, I want to say, hey, here's the top 10 in the county, and the top 4 have referrals or whatever, right? So like I would recommend these top 4, and then I give them those 4, right? So I started going through that. While I was doing that, Tyler gave me the name of a guy with a general home inspection company. He just gave me the name. He was like, Nick from whatever inspector.com is really great. And so he sent me his contact card. And, you know, Tyler doesn't save names. So it says Nick Inspect, and it's a number, and that's it. That's the whole contact card.
Nice.
So I went through and tried to find more information about him to actually complete the contact card. So that way when I said
actual name Nicholas?
huh?
What's his actual
His
name?
full name is Nicholas Wright, and I found him through Sunbiz because he owns.
Isn't that always
company.
fucked when people hate you with that shit? When they
What?
send you like a name of someone and like I've had that happen at work where they're like, "Oh yeah, talk to John," and I'll try to pull him up on Teams and like and then I realize it's actually fucking Jonathan, and I'm like,
Yeah.
bro, like,
Look at this. So I found that's him.
There you go,
That's him and his family. It's his first and last name, and then Nick as a nickname because that's
when
what
you
he goes
say him
by.
and his family, I thought of that Theo Vaughn skit where he's like, "I'll be a peeping Tom if I can. I'll want your whole family eat dinner."
It's kind of like that. I found his home number, his work number, his home address, which is the business address. I found both Instagrams, his personal and his work, his both Facebooks. He is not on LinkedIn, but he owns his own business, so not surprising. And then I wrote the breakdown here, right? So I have this for everyone in my phone. It's just usually I do it for people who I know personally, and this is the first time I've gone like fucking psycho stalker mode and found it for someone who I don't know, but is a valuable contact because
First message should just be, "How's your dog doing?"
yeah, I guess it's not the first time I've done it, is it? Because I did it with that guy at work. But the reason he's so important is because general home inspectors will tick off like of the 6 major inspections you should get done before you buy a home. General home inspectors do 4 of the 6. So if he's a good dude, and the reason Tyler said he's good is because home inspectors and specifically roof inspectors want to feel important. So they'll go in with their clipboard and they'll be like, I don't know, this little this thing right here could be a problem.
Yeah.
You should mark it down. This stuff looks like mold. And you're like, that's paint. And he's like, could be mold. You should get a mold inspection. And like, they want to feel important. But Tyler said Nick does a really good job of pinpointing the real issues and then not making them out into a bigger deal than they are. He tells it like it is.
Yeah.
And I really value that. And I know that he has a background in this because he worked for a previous inspection company before founding this company. Because I found that out through, I don't even remember where, just old records. But he has a career in this. It's not like he's new. And I have a direct referral. So that's dope. So I started putting that together. And that's a big deal because the guy who we have another showing scheduled for on Friday, the new client, he needs inspectors. So this list is coming together nicely. Past that, I picked up 4 new apartment clients, talking to people at the bar. And then I had a meeting with one yesterday. And it turns out he already found an apartment that he wants to use on Facebook Marketplace. And it's interesting. I was a little skeeved out at first because it's $890 a month, which is real cheap for a studio. But he has a history selling on Facebook Marketplace. It's a legitimate address. So I was like, go check it out before you sign anything. A lot of times Facebook scammers will post fake places and then tell you that they need like a security deposit to like secure the appointment. And then they skip town. So they take your security, whatever, $100.
Yeah, they'll take pictures off Zillow and
Yeah.
just start listing someone else's shit.
Yep. But this seems legit.
It happens with cars all the time too.
Yep.
People list like some Supra or whatever that's someone else's picture. So they'll take pictures of someone else's car in a parking lot and then throw it on Facebook Marketplace and then do something.
Yeah.
It's fucked.
So he ended up not needing me for an apartment, but he needs a commercial space for his business. He doesn't have one yet and he's looking to rent. And so Grace was there for my apartment appointment because she has to be for all of them because I'm not working with a brokerage. And she was like, dude, this is great because I know a lot of places in the commercial space. So she started helping him out with that. So no apartment for him, but whatever. We have him for a commercial lockout. And apartments don't always give real estate agents commission for finding tenants.
Yeah.
But commercial spaces usually do because usually they're longer leases and more money, right? So Grace should actually get commission from that on top of hopefully a Google review.
Cool.
That'd be cool. And then I have another meeting this Sunday night to help 2 more people look for apartments or 3 more people look for apartments as well. So that's going well.
Nice.
Past that, Grace and I have been meaning to go to city hall meetings for Melbourne City. I used to go to them when Shaw's dad bought the fast station on 192 because at the time he wanted to get rid of the Daily Bread because it's a homeless soup kitchen that's like right down the road and the homeless people were causing a lot of problems for us. And so he was like, hey, I'm investing like $500,000 into this fucking place. Like I don't want homeless people everywhere. So we were going to those city town hall meetings a lot, and I learned a lot about the area when I went. So I told Grace, hey, I want to start going to those. So finally, we made the time to go last night. And like I think I told you, Christian fucking invited himself 10 times that night, which annoyed the shit out of me. Even afterward, we came back to the bar, and again, he was like, how was it? When's the next one? Are you going to go to the next one? I'd love to go with you guys. And fucking, I'm not interested. Like, just take a hint. Jesus fucking Christ. But I did learn a lot from the meeting, which is good. Not only did they go over the new homeless solution that they're doing, because they're getting rid of the Daily Bread. In 60 days, the Daily Bread
Aren't they
goes away.
putting it over by the AMCM?
Yes, kind of.
Yeah, it's a cross.
Not quite. What they're doing is the Daily Bread is shutting down and kind of converting into a mobile soup kitchen.
Okay.
The big deal is they're putting affordable housing units on Sarno. So they're getting 3.5 acres and they're building a $3 million basically apartment complex of affordable housing. And so the whole issue with it is if Melbourne tax dollars are going to this building, Melbourne citizens should see the benefits. So if a person became homeless in Melbourne and has lived in Melbourne, they should be able to rent at a reduced price, right? The problem is all the surrounding cities don't have a homeless problem because ever since the Daily Bread showed up, they've been busing them all here. Right.
Yeah.
So how do you prove that a homeless person has or hasn't lived in Melbourne for over a year? That's difficult. It's also not in the official contract. So there were a bunch of citizens who were like, raising concerns about it last night because they were like, hey, I understand this seems like a good thing to do, but how are we going to prove it? And then on top of that, this building is within like 2 square miles of 7 schools. And
yeah, it sounds like a terrible idea.
Like it or not, homeless people are homeless for a reason. Some of them are just down on their luck. A lot of them have drug and mental issues.
Yeah.
The owner
True.
of a car dealership, like 1 block away or something, said that he had a homeless guy like throwing stuff and yelling and causing a ruckus yesterday, like the day before the meeting, Tuesday, Monday.
Mm.
And he lost a sale because of it. One of the customers was afraid to go outside and look at cars because this dude was going nuts, and none of his staff wanted to go out and take care of it either. So that's the position on the Daily Bread. But not only did I learn about that, which is good to know as a real estate agent, even though I can't not recommend places because of stuff like that, because as a real estate agent, I'm not allowed to not
Yeah.
recommend you places because of crime, but it's good to know anyways. On top of that, they went over rezoning issues because one of the guys, the Turtle Mound area where Emily used to live,
Yeah.
um, that is all zoned residential, right?
Mhm.
There's one plot in the middle of those neighborhoods, right next to like a multi-million dollar property neighborhood that's just vacant land. It hasn't been built on yet, right?
Mhm.
This dude and his wife bought this land, but couldn't afford to put a house on it. He was like, I hope you understand land's expensive, buildings are expensive. It's tough in this economy. We wanted to build the land and then live in a mobile home unit on it and then build our dream house, right? And so they said, okay, you're allowed to live on the land in a mobile home unit until you can get your house built, right? Here's 3 years to go do that.
Mm.
So he has like a 3-year grace period, right? Well, he put a 4-bedroom, 2-bath manufactured home on it, which technically is a mobile home, even though you can't like uproot it and get it gone in 3 days, right? So now he's coming back to city council and he's like, hey, everyone, I would like to rezone to agricultural land to basically extend this 3-year grace period of the mobile home indefinitely because this is my house now. I don't know when the dream house is happening. This is kind of like, what we're going to stick with for a while. And so a lot of the residents are like, hold on. If you make it ag land, he can have horses and cows and all that kind of shit. We live in like multi-million dollar properties 10 feet away. I don't want that shit. There's already coyotes killing chickens in our backyard from his chickens that he already has. That's like putting feathers everywhere. Um, we don't want
Yeah.
him to have hooved animals. And so they went back and forth on it a lot. And like something that I didn't think they were considering is if you have agricultural land and you have cows on it, you're exempt from property taxes, which
Mm.
makes your property a lot more valuable, especially if you're in a developed residential area around it. So when Grace's current property that's closing tomorrow, when they were shopping for places, they were one of the places they were considering was a piece of agricultural land that was next to rapidly developing neighborhoods. And they were like, dude, this land is going to become really valuable when developers move in and want to build another unit. So by changing this to ag land, they're going to crazy like bump up the value of this property. But also allow them to have hooved animals and stuff. So ultimately they were like, hey, we'll rezone it, but you just can't have like big animals and stuff. And that's what they ended up going with. But it was interesting because I essentially got to watch a zoning permit be born, which
Yeah.
was really valuable to see, who do I contact if I have someone who wants to rezone? Now I know the lady who runs the economic development for Melbourne, and I know the Melbourne City Council. I sat right up front in the middle, so they know me now
Yeah.
too, and I'll be there every week. So that was really interesting. I really liked
Cool.
that. And my last update is when we were in that meeting, one of the line items was the Ogali Arts District, EGAD, wants more funding. They've been progressively asking in the annual budget each year for less and less money. And this year, they're like, hey, we need an out of cycle payment that's like over double what we're going to be asking for from the annual budget. Just this once, please. We've been asking for less year on year. So, like, now we need some more. But their whole spiel was like, we haven't needed as much money from you guys because we're becoming profitable. And now we need this big lump of money from you to become self sufficient and not need your money at all anymore. But my question is, you've been asking for less money, like whatever, 55,000, 50,000. Now you're asking for 120 and you're going to be asking for another 45,000 at the annual budget. So like, are you becoming profitable? Cuz like that's a lot of money you're asking for. And when they asked her, how are you going to make this profitable? She was like, well, in order to get federal grants, we need to have like a certain number of foot traffic through our like art events. And so we need to do more advertising and like get
So
more
it's not
investors and stuff.
profitable.
So it's not profitable. And she didn't have like it wasn't convincing to me because it's like detail out how you're going to spend $120,000 to make this a
Right.
bigger event. And she wasn't doing that in her presentation. So I was talking to Grace because she closes on her property tomorrow. And after that, there's only like another like 4 or 5 people she's working with. And I want to start cramming a bunch of stuff on her plate because her last shift at the bar is on Saturday. Um, so I want to start getting like more clients to her. And I was like, we should start calling for sale by owner houses because people think they can sell the houses on their own and save on money because they don't have to pay a real estate agent. But the fact is, they're going to get less money for it. They're probably going to fuck it up, and it's not a good idea. They should have a real estate agent. It's why real estate agents exist. So it's common for real estate agents to call these for sale by owners and say, hey, listen, I know you're trying to save money. I'm only going to cost you 2.5% the value of the home. I can get you an average of 7% more than other FSBO sellers have made, meaning that you net 5.5%. How's that sound? And then go from there. So, or 4.5%, I guess, in that example.
4.5, yeah.
But still, it's 4.5% than if you sold it on your own, and you don't have to deal with all of it. So, as I was talking to Grace about this, I was like, listen, I don't want to have that conversation with a seller without having the type of data that this Eau Gallie Arts District lady didn't have. I want to have like clear, discernible, like, hey, here's what I'm going to do for you as a real estate agent, and here's why it's valuable. And so in my head, I just wrote out the Hormozy value equation for making a competitive offer, and I started to fill in the boxes. And I was like, oh shit, dude, this is an opportunity to use Hormozy's value equation to like make an offer and then pitch it to an FSBO and then go get more leads by using his lead gen book, which is also on Spotify. So I had that idea an hour ago, and Grace has started writing some stuff out for it. But that's one of the next things that I'm going to be doing while I delay picking a brokerage because I don't have my tax refund yet.
Oh, got it. Got it.
So that's my business update
Cool.
in short order.
I'd say you've probably already thought about this, but what I've found through a lot of like advertising and pitching from my own tests, as well as looking at a lot of really successful advertisers and pitchers,
Yeah.
is that they really hone in on how does whatever I'm presenting to you or selling to you benefit me rather than what are the features of the thing that you are providing me. Right.
Right.
And the difference being the features are like, let's do a speaker setup because it's just an easy, tangible thing that we can both, easy for me at least. It has great sound quality. It goes up to 100 decibels. It has a 8-hour battery life as well as a DC plug on it, right? Those would be features, but benefits would be like, share the moment with your family with this new speaker, or bring your living room to life, or, quality that lasts for years to come, and worry-free music, whatever, right? So like, I think like incorporating some of that stuff too could prove valuable in the real estate stuff, because I think, especially, at least in my presumption, is that a lot of people who try to sell their homes individually are either don't want to spend the money on it because they feel like they can't really afford, like, in their mind, a loss,
Right.
right? And so like tying in the uh the benefits to their future of having a real estate agent, and maybe outlining like case scenarios of, what commonly happens with people who don't use real estate agents and how that impacts their life down the line or today.
Yeah.
Right? Like, line that in on top of like the features of being like the actual statistics and nitty gritty.
Yeah. Tyler recommended going in and telling them like, hey man, like, uh, detailing the hurdles that they might run into and aren't prepared to handle as a non.
Yeah, tying into like their emotional side.
Yeah, and saying like, "Hey man, like I don't like I'm looking out for you, like I don't want you to get fucked." Like, yeah, I'm not getting paid for this. I'm not on commission. I'm not your real estate agent. I'm just looking to make sure that you know like what to look for. Like you have to look out for these permits, you have to look out for these real estate agents fucking you over in this way or that way. If you accept an offer, you can't renegotiate afterward. But if you're in inspection period, whatever, like all these different things. And then go in and say, "Hey man, listen, like I know you have it listed on Zillow, but as a real estate agent, I can get it listed on the MLS and I can pay for Facebook ads free of charge," and et cetera, et cetera. And then like fill out what I really defined it as, the value equation is dream outcome, perceived likelihood of achievement over effort and sacrifice, and time delay, right? Time delay and effort and sacrifice is easy. I'm a real estate agent. I can get it sold faster and you don't have to do anything. So the bottom half of the equation isn't a big deal. Dream outcome is easy, right? You want to save money by not paying a real estate agent. That means I have to get you more value for the property than you would be getting otherwise and net my own cost, right? And then some to make it actually worth you. The perceived likelihood of achievement is the difficult variable there because it's, well, can I trust you, right? Have you done it before? What experience do you have? And what are you actually, like, what tools do you actually have that I don't? Because I get listed on Zillow and I can negotiate because I negotiated my lawnmower for 10% more than average or whatever, right? When they sold it. So that's, I think, that what we're going to be working out this week and weekend. But I have a fucking busy week. So let's get into the life updates.
Yes, I don't really have many, to be honest.
Okay.
I mean, it's only been a few days, and I've
I
just
have
been
so much.
working on the what?
I said I have so much.
Oh, really?
I don't know. A lot. I don't know.
I mean, I've just been
I have a lot
going to work, and then I come home. Honestly, the notes, that was a small thing for me, but small thing is in one line item, but the actual process of going through all those notes took probably 6 hours.
Right.
So yeah.
All right. Well, it sounds like you're living your life to the fullest,
I am.
and enjoying it. I have a lot of stuff coming up, more so than like stuff that I've already done. But I had an interesting update. But first and foremost, I got to call my dad this weekend, which was really nice.
Cool.
I called last weekend before your baptism. I wanted to talk to each of my parents while I did meal prep because I had to cut meat for like fucking 2 hours. And I started off by calling my mom because I knew if I called my dad first and talked to him, my mom would hear him on the phone with me and freak out
Mhm.
that I didn't call her first. So I called her first. She didn't pick up. Called my dad. He didn't pick up. Um, but it turns out my dad's phone didn't ring. And then 45 minutes later, my mom called me back. And that's why she's not my emergency contact anymore. Fun fact. But talked to her and that was nice, but I didn't get to talk to my dad. So I talked to him this weekend. And it was really nice. We had like 2 3 hour conversations, which was it was good to
Oh,
hear
wow.
from him. Yeah, yeah, he's doing well. I think we talked about some of the Doge stuff in the last example. So he has like a lot going on at work. But
Yeah.
the more I talk to him, the more I recognize that this podcast in particular has gotten him to think a lot more introspectively and more about personal growth. And it's really nice to see that you could do that at any age. Like you
Yeah.
can like we have decided to start looking at this kind of stuff and considering how our thought process works and how we feel about things irrelevant from how the rest of the world sees stuff.
Right.
And if we think something because that's the way it is it the right way? Like a little bit more introspection and like holding up a mirror and doing some
Yeah. I'm
self-reflection.
so glad you said that. Have you listened to the podcast with Chase Hughes on Joe Rogan?
Who's Chase Hughes?
He is a hypnotist.
Jesus. Okay.
And I was hesitant to click on it
You know,
because
Mike Tyson was hypnotized before every fight in
yeah,
his early career.
yeah.
That shit's cool.
They talk a little bit about it. And
Really?
yeah, they
That's
spend like
dope.
30, 40 minutes on it.
Really?
Yeah.
Dude, that's sick. That was always so cool to me, dude. That's what stands out about Tyson.
I listened to it, and at first I was like, I don't know if I'm really gonna like this,
Do I
but
know that name?
I was like, whatever, I'll just put the song in the background.
Yeah.
And I put it on and I started listening to it, and it was kind of like stuff that I'd heard before, like mind manipulation and visualization, and then they started talking about Mike Tyson and other fighters. Yeah.
Looks like Hannibal Lecter.
But they started talking about Mike Tyson and some other fighters, and then it started to get a little bit deeper and more interesting. And they started talking about like some really interesting. I don't want to spoil it because I really would love to see you listen to it.
Okay.
But just really interesting studies and analyses that were done in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s.
Tell me
throughout
some,
history.
tell me some of it so that I'm engaged. Because if not, I'll forget and I'm not
Yeah,
caring.
one of the studies that was really, really interesting was this was done in the 80s. I can't remember the name of the experiment, but I remember what happened.
I trust you.
There was a group of doctors or psychologists, and they got together and they said, okay, we want to run tests essentially to gauge on how much authority has an influence on people. How important is authority figures? How important is that to your mental state and what you're convinced to do or not? Oh, he also goes into cults, which is how it starts, which is really cool. But anyways,
Is this the prisoner's experiment?
no,
Okay.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Essentially, they're like, how responsive are people to authority? So they create this test, and they essentially go, okay, we're gonna have an actor in a room behind
Shock one.
the shock
Yeah.
yeah.
This is
You
dope.
want me to continue?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll be brief.
Yeah.
It's a shock experiment, and they have someone behind glass, and there's a doctor with someone randomly selected. They don't know really why they're there. They know they are there to uh, administer a shock when the question is answered incorrectly.
Yep.
That's all they know. And then the actor looks like he's tied up to a like electrical probe machine. He looks like he's actually getting shocked. He acts like he's getting shocked, right? So
Yep.
they start at 25 and then they go to 50 volts, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300, 350.
Mhm.
At 300, the actor passes out,
Mhm.
right? Passes out.
Right.
And then there's a 350 shock as well after that point. Originally, when they put together the experiment, they thought that 0.06, I think it was less than 0.1% for sure. 0.06% about people would go through and administer all of the shocks because they thought like only like really psychopath, crazy people who they might have randomly selected would actually go through with it. They start going through the test, and 250 volts is a lethal dose. based on the amperage, right? But generally speaking, if you're above 250 volts, even if the amperage is really low, you're gonna die,
Yeah.
right? And so they go up in voltage, these people in this test room, and they see this actor screaming and, in a lot of pain, and they keep increasing the voltage based on the doctor's recommendations because the doctor keeps saying they got the question wrong, you have to increase the voltage
Right.
and shock them, right? Um, what percentage do you think made it to the end, 350 volts? This is
I thought it was close to half. Am I remembering that wrong?
no, you're on the right track. Keep in mind at 300 the actor is passed out on the table.
Yeah.
350 they're still administering a shock with
Yeah.
this person that has been screaming and now looks dead.
The way that I heard this study told was that you're sitting in a room with the buttons and the person who's in the room next to you, you can't see them, but the speakers are playing audio of an actor saying it wrong and screaming in agony. So you can't see them, but you hear it happening, and they keep going, and eventually it's silent and they just hear like the thuds of like the body moving, and they keep going.
Got it.
Yeah, but
Okay.
same deal, same
Yeah,
deal.
same deal.
Yeah.
250 is the lethal dose. 300, the actor passes out. 350 concludes the finalization of the test. What
Yeah.
percentage of people do you think made it to 350?
It's 56.
It was over 70%.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it was something like 75 or 78%. It was very high.
Yeah.
And the percentage of people who went to the lethal dose of 250 was 100%.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So he dives into stuff like that, and he goes into some really interesting stuff about fighters and like manipulating the mind and just really, really interesting stuff. Anyways, he dives into, oh God, where did we start this conversation? What do you remember what you
Talking to
said?
my dad about personal growth.
Oh man. You said like one line that
It's
like
never
just-
too old. You can do it at any age. Start reflection. Start thinking more introspectively about just because you think something is one way, does it have to be that way, or is it really the right way to do it?
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, I forgot. The audience will probably be able to connect the dots by rewinding. We can't rewind in real time, but the audience. Zap and friends.
All right. It's just that.
But anyways, it was, I guess I can tie it in. I had such a great tie-in for this and I forgot it. I'm so sorry.
You're good.
It is really interesting how the mind works and the mind is able to be manipulated.
Yeah.
And how we are so formable and we don't even realize it, and we can change our perspectives in ways that we never thought we could.
Mhm.
And it's never too late, and the mind is incredibly powerful for determining your path, and even not just your mental state as you go through it, but your actual physical actions.
Yeah.
And that's been proven with a lot of the fight studies, specifically talking about fighters, where there will be a fighter hypnotized, and they'll be hypnotized to like not run out of oxygen. They always feel like fulfilled. They don't feel pain, like
Yeah.
stuff like this. And there's videos of fighters who get like absolutely struck across the face,
Mhm.
and their face muscles do not move at all.
Yeah.
Or they get done with a 9-round fight, and they're on the side, like after the bell rings,
Hanging
and their
out.
chest isn't moving at all. Like they're
Like,
not
not
breathing.
breathing?
They're not breathing heavily at all. They're just sitting,
Got it. I see what you
like
mean.
chilled. And it's like the other guy is like almost passed out from exhaustion.
Yeah.
And the other, like, that is a genuine physical change
Mhm.
in their ability to go through, life, and in that specific case, their fight, right?
Yeah.
That is solely dictated by manipulation of the mind.
Yeah.
And so it's like, if you're able to focus on self-growth and how to help yourself, and it's not like everyone needs a hypnotist out there, but if you just start to focus on these little things, as you repeat things in your head, they become solidified.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason why like visualization of success is so important, is
Mhm.
because like the mammalian part of your brain, that's how Chris Hughes, I think that was his name.
Chase Hughes.
Chase Hughes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chase Hughes, the mammalian part of your brain, he refers to it, it doesn't speak English, but it does speak visualizations.
Mhm.
And so if you're visualizing failure and all these things, or you're visualizing bad thoughts, that's why it has such a negative impact on your outcome. If you visualize success, That's why you're able to materialize it into something concrete, is because you actually perform actions differently and go through life differently when that mammalian part of your brain has that ingrained in it, because it is already shooting for that success,
Yeah.
right? And so it was really interesting. But long story short, yeah, it's never too late to change, and it's always, I think, beneficial to focus on self growth and self improvement.
Last week, I mentioned that in a Drive to Survive episode, Lando Norris was going through like a meditation hypnosis session.
Yes.
The guy, he had his eyes closed and he was laying flat. And the guy was like, picture success. And he was like, I'm picturing reliability failure. You're telling me to box. A wheel nut is stuck. I have to retire the car. And like,
Yeah.
he's kind of like joking about it, right? I don't remember exactly if this is correct or not, but I like the way it works in my mind. That race weekend was Singapore. And he qualified on pole. He lost the lead lap one, like he usually does. He regains the lead again, and he like starts to walk it. And like, this is the point in the season where he could win the championship if he starts to really pull heavy on Max Verstappen, and he has the car to do it, right? And
Yeah.
he's always talked about how Lewis Hamilton and Max are the best drivers ever because they have the nicest car. Now he has the nicest car, and it's time to show it, right? So he's building a lead, and he's like growing the lead throughout the race, and he's in the lead by like 20 seconds, right? And he locks up into a corner and almost clips the front wing on the wall. And then he has to get back on track. And by the time he gets back on track, he's only like 8 seconds ahead of Max now, right? And then he goes on and he wins the race. But what I noticed, I know that that's how that race went. They didn't really make a big deal of it in Netflix, The Drive to Survive. But I know that the whole talking point about that race was Lando won by 20 seconds, but it could have been 30 because he locked up into whatever, turn 8 on lap 50, right?
Yeah.
And then in contrast to that, every single race that Max Verstappen did in 2023 was completely flawless. Like
Yeah.
there was no, like, doesn't matter how far in the lead he was, he didn't put a foot wrong. There was once he ran one wheel over the grass in, I can't remember, maybe Australia or something.
Yeah. Didn't he hit a
2023, that's it.
cone or something like that?
That was Miami this year. But in
Okay.
2023, the year where he won everything, not a foot wrong. And then a couple races later, this past year, right after Lando won, but like kind of locked up into one of the corners when he was off racing nobody, right? Max drove from P17 to win in Brazil in the wet. Didn't put a foot wrong the entire time, right? Lando locked up into turn 1 and lost a ton of places. Like, not taking the visualization stuff seriously is a huge mistake, I think,
Yeah.
that a lot of people don't recognize.
And it jumps into a whole nother like category of mindset of, if you're going to do something, take it seriously.
Yeah.
Right? Like what is the point of spending time to do an activity and to not even try to take it seriously? Right? Like that's a
Not a
whole nother
serious
topic.
activity, right? Like, there's
Right.
some stuff that's fun stuff that you should just
Yeah,
have
yeah,
fun with,
yeah.
but like, if you're gonna be a fucking Formula 1 driver,
Right. If you're gonna
lock
try to
in.
do something, like actually try to do it.
Right, lock in.
Yeah.
And that's why Oscar Piastri is gonna win this weekend in Australia.
There you
I'm
go.
calling it now. But I thought it was interesting as well with the mental barrier stuff, because your body can do things and your mind is what stops you, right?
Yeah.
It, like your brain, conscious, subconscious, like both of them, right? And in rowing, Zap will appreciate this. Good morning, buddy. Happy Tuesday. At a certain point in your rowing career, you're not really seeing a lot of gains in your muscle, right?
Yeah.
Either because you're working out so much you can't recover well enough to grow new muscle, or you have just gotten to the point where your body isn't going to be much more conditioned. And at that point, all that's left for you to gain efficiency is either technique, which again, if you're in your 10th year of rowing, you're probably maxing that out or close to it, right? There's no such thing as a perfect stroke, but we're all getting pretty close at this point. The last thing to do is your mental barrier, is to push the mental wall back. Because in a race piece, around, like, when you first start, you hit the wall halfway through, and like you take a stroke off, and then you take a second stroke off, and the second half of your piece falls apart, right? And then as you get better, more conditioned, you push that wall back to like 1750 or 1800 meters. So like only the last 200 meters really is difficult, right? But the greatest rowers can eradicate that wall entirely. They push it back until they fucking obliterate it. And so my high school rowing coach was really focused on getting these kids not only physically conditioned, but mentally conditioned.
Yeah.
And so some of the training that we would do is we would get on the water and he would say, okay, we're going to go at like 85% race pace. And you're going to go until I tell you to stop. And then we just started. And so it's that same thing, the staring off into the abyss, like Elon Musk, where it's like, oh, you don't know when this is going to end. You're going to go until he says to stop.
Yeah.
And you just keep going. And then that builds the mental toughness, because then when you get into the race, you're like, I don't care how much is left. I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
Before you know it, the race is over. So anyways, yeah. Talked to my dad. That was great.
Cool.
I had fun. And then I did some math. This is what I told you I was going to text you, and then I ended not texting you to save it for the podcast. So I'm getting a tax refund this year, right? Haven't gotten it yet. Went to the IRS office. They're waiting on the Kahuna paperwork, I'm pretty sure, but it's submitted. So now we're just waiting. I'm going to make an appointment for next week to go in and harass them about it. But I started to consider, okay, I can change my withholding so that they don't withhold too much. They withhold just my amount of taxes. I get a $0 refund. Maybe I owe $100. Maybe they owe me $100, but I get that money throughout the year, right? How much money is it really? I broke it down and they're taking $177 extra dollars a paycheck.
Mm,
So across a month, it's over $300 that they're keeping, which
yeah.
to me right now is a pretty big difference.
Close to 4.
Yeah, it's a pretty big
Yeah.
difference for me. So I could really use that every month. And I worked the math backward. Here's the numbers. My 2024 income, I'm rounding to whole numbers just to make it easier to visualize. 2024, I made $80,000. I paid $13,800 in taxes, and my refund is $4,600. So by reverse engineering the math, in order for the $13,800 in taxes that I paid to actually match my income to the point where it's a $0 refund, I would have to be making $100,000 a year, which is 25% more than what I make right now.
Yeah.
So I filed for a $20,000 tax deduction because in your W-4, you can be more detailed about it, but Northrop doesn't allow you to just submit a W-4. I don't know why anyone doesn't just let me submit my fucking form because I know how to fill it out. Instead, they ask me questions that correlate to questions on the W-4 and then they decide what to fill out with.
Yeah.
Right? It's annoying. But there's 2 columns which say, if you want us to withhold more, let us know. And there's 1 column that says, if you have itemized deductions for 2025 and you think that you're going to like get a deduction for some non-specific thing, let us know how much you want to deduct your tax withholding by. So the problem is in there, I
We're
thought it
able to
was,
find $20,000 worth of deductions?
I filed for it.
But, like, what items are you deducting?
I'm not. I'm not deducting a specific item. I'm deducting $20,000 off of my income to save that $4,600 tax refund because they're over withholding by my income of $20,000, right? Because think about it this way, the deduction isn't the specific amount of money I get back each paycheck, it's the income that I'm deducting from my taxable income.
Right,
So
right.
they're taxing me as if my taxable income is 100,000. And so I'm telling them actually it's 80,000.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
You got it.
Yeah.
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 So essentially, I'm telling them, hey, don't tax me on $20,000. And they're going to go, what? And I'm going to go, you're over withholding by $20,000. And the reason I think they do that is because Northrop Grumman has a big pool of money, right? And they pay you each paycheck your dues, right? And they keep your tax withholding for them to then give to the government at the end of each quarter or the end of each year, depending
Yeah.
on when they pay, right? But they hold on to it for that quarter or year. They can invest it in that quarter a year. They can spend it in that quarter a year. They don't have they could be making money on that money, right? So the $400 a month that I need back, they might be getting 3% on. I don't know. Like they might be making money on my money. So they don't want to cut back your tax withholding. They want to overpay so you get a tax refund in April so you feel good and they make money. But I don't want that. I want my money every month. So I'm expecting they're going to push back on the deduction, but I'm going to fucking fight them for it because I don't want a tax refund next year.
It just clicked for me what you were doing. You're essentially saying that they're over withholding because they're withholding as though you have $100,000 income.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I gotcha.
And the difference between paying taxes on $80,000 of income and $100,000 of income is my tax refund.
Right.
That's the
Right.
difference.
I got you.
So in order to actually get it down to what it should be, I have to claim a $20,000 deduction on $80,000 of income, even though it's actually a $20,000 deduction on their bullshit math of $100,000.
Hmm.
So I'm basically having to claim a $20,000 deduction to make up for their bad math. And I know that their bad math is intentional because I think that they're investing my money to make
Yeah.
a
Probably.
percentage back on it.
Yeah.
But that's my life update.
Cool.
We have an actual podcast today if you're interested.
We do. I am mildly interested.
Wow. Mildly? You picked the topic.
I'm just kidding.
Okay. So today, our main topic is called Have the Hard Conversation. Chris Williamson talks about having the hard conversation to avoid or get rid of anxiety. Generally speaking, I think this is a really great policy to carry through all walks of life. We've all overcome an obstacle only to then think, man, I wish I had done this earlier. I'd like to emphasize, and maybe with some firsthand accounts, not only how to have the hard conversation, but how to be sure you aren't doing it too early. So our first segment is on why are you afraid of making the tough decision? Now, at first pass, I think this prompt seems kind of redundant. If you weren't afraid of committing to a decision, then it wouldn't be a tough decision in the first place. So it's kind of a paradox, right? This is sort of like how you can't practice patience without not wanting to wait for the time to be up. Wait. You can't practice patience without wanting to wait for the time to be up. The very act of waiting,
Mm,
of not wanting to wait, is the patience, right?
right.
Bravery works the same way. Taking heroic action in the face of danger isn't seen as bravery unless the person taking action is afraid and does it anyway. So, with this in mind, I think the weight and gravity associated with the tough decision is what makes them tough decisions. So that's more of a dictionary definition and less of a traits and emotional avoidance and physical discomfort type stuff.
Right.
But I'm curious to hear what your perception of this is, because this is the prompt that I struggled with the most in the first three on why you're afraid of making tough decisions. I have more like specifics here, but generally speaking, that's our intro.
So I actually I pulled from that hypnotist podcast a little bit.
Okay.
Because I didn't realize until I started writing, but there were a lot of parallels between that podcast and this topic in particular.
Cool.
Um, because
So what you're saying is our listeners shouldn't even bother with modern wisdom because they can just hear the analysis and the application here.
that's right.
It's spectacular.
Um,
The road to monetization. No,
Yeah.
I'm kidding. Dude, the more I listen to these fucking F1 podcasts, the more happy I am that we don't have advertisements and
Yeah.
never will. Because these fucking podcasts, they're maybe
super annoying.
20 minutes, 7 minutes of ads.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Go on.
but Chase Hughes, he dives into why people are scared of public speaking. And he says it's not that the act of speaking is actually what scares people. It's the potential rejection or ostracization. And he specifically ties this into psyops. And so he says that there are a bunch of different factors that you can look at in order to identify what a psyop that may be going on.
Can you define PSYOP?
Psyop would be like a
Is that a
a
psychological
scheme. It's
operation?
like a psychological scheme,
Okay.
like
operation.
to make you think a certain way, right? Like, for example,
Oh.
if a bunch of left-wing newscasters all
Mhm.
started saying the same thing online at the same time and posting it in the same way and having the same sort of presentation and hand motions, that might be a psyop.
Interesting. You know, that was a complete
Just
coincidence.
theoretical.
They didn't have a script. That
No,
was
they
complete
didn't. They didn't.
coincidence. Yeah.
I heard that from those same newscasters that they didn't have a script.
Yeah.
Actually, all at the same time.
in their script.
Yeah.
I mean, in their videos.
Right. Well, they said it all at the same time, so it's convincing. But
that's what unity's all about. That's the Joe Biden unity promise.
that's right. Yeah. But he was talking about how to identify psyops, and there are a bunch of different factors. But he said that the one factor that every time, without fault, will identify a psyop is, I'm so sorry, I'm stuttering for words. Is if you see the attempt to ostracize people who believe against that opinion. So if it's like, I need to silence this voice or I need to silence these opinions, those kinds of things
Right.
are very clear indicators of a potential psyop. Very clear. So it's like, for example, he dove into the COVID example.
For example, Christian wanting to turn the religious movie off because it's propaganda and they shouldn't be playing that at the bar.
Yeah.
Because he wants to silence that voice.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. But he dove into the COVID example where he was like, you couldn't say the word vaccine online.
Yeah.
Or you couldn't talk about the side effects.
Right.
Or you couldn't talk about the Wuhan lab or anything like that, right?
Wuhan lab.
Yeah. Is that not what I said? Did I say it weird?
Huh? No, I was playing along with the bit.
Oh.
Like what Wuhan lab?
Oh, yeah.
There is a-
Oh, I didn't hear you. Yeah. But he was talking about that, and he was like, that's a very clear indication of a psyop.
Yeah.
And the reason it is because the act of trying to shut down someone else's opinion puts that person who's trying to shut the other one down in a frame of mind where they are imposing rejection and judgment on the other person. And that is a very easy way to target that like mammalian part of the brain that essentially says, well, shit, I must be wrong. I'm just going to shut up.
Right.
Right. And so I think my theory on these tough decisions is that, at least for me in my life, it is stemmed from, or at least the procrastination of making tough decisions in my life in the past has stemmed from the fear of rejection or ostracization by the person that I'm talking to.
Right.
Right. And so I think that has that's a very um, fundamental point in why people avoid making these decisions. Is because they'd rather live their life in internal denial than take the chance on being proved that they are actually wrong in other people's perspective.
Which is interesting because if you deny yourself, there's a 100% chance of denial. But if you open up the opportunity of maybe having other people agree to you with a smaller percent chance of it being denial, it's like of your two options, it's either 100% denial or maybe 70% denial. But like the only route in which case it could work is if you take the risk.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've identified something similar in repercussions. The reason that people avoid making tough decisions is because it means that usually one of the parties involved must suffer a loss, right? That's usually what makes a decision tough, right? You're going to have to let someone down. Um, and this loss could be like a harm to a relationship or outright destruction of over a relationship. Letting someone down or even seeing consequences yourself. Like if you're the one who decides to like take the hit, that can be a tough decision too. Right?
Yeah.
You don't want to hurt other people and you don't want other people to hate you, right? And so not wanting other people to hate you is a repercussion as a factor of that fear of rejection, right?
Hmm.
Fear of repercussions is alike to fear of rejections, right? And yeah,
Fear of repercussions is a
factor of the fear of rejections.
right.
If you're
Right.
rejected, that's a repercussion, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a factor of that.
The consequences of rejection are powerful in
Yes.
people's mind.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
And I also tied this into one of this kind of ties into the procrastination aspect a little bit,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Which we talked about last week, if I'm recalling correctly. That was last
Yeah.
week.
No, it was
Um,
2 days ago.
well, yes, that's true. But this also ties into another previous podcast topic that we've had, which was is college worth it? Because one of the debates that we had was or not really debates, but kind of talking points and conversations was that school teaches you that being wrong is bad,
Right.
right? And that is placed in you instinctually ever since you start getting grades, or ever since the moment you start being disciplined in school, or
Did you
being
get
forced to what?
Did you get green, yellow, and red cards in kindergarten?
No, we got 1, 2s, 3s, and 4s. So 1 was like good, and then 4s was bad.
You got them every day.
You got them once a semester, and we had 2 semesters.
Oh, so they're like report cards.
Yeah, yeah,
Got it.
yeah.
We had cards every day, and if you acted a fool, they would change it from green to yellow to red.
Yeah.
If it's red, you get a call from your teacher. So I got a red card for the first
Got it.
time
If
ever.
you had a 3 or a 4, you'd get a call.
Yeah, but it's once a semester, right?
Right.
Some kids' parents were getting calls every day.
Oh,
They
wow.
like big kids and shit.
Damn.
One time, my friend told me I could have one of his Oreos, and so I had it. And then he told the teacher that I stole it from him, so I got a red card. That was on Halloween day, and I got in the car to drive home, and my mom was like, "How was school?" And I was like, "Great." She was like, "Did you get a green card today?" I was like, "Yep." Got home, got dressed in my costume. My mom got a call from the teacher, and she said she was pissed, but she was quiet pissed. And I was like, "I'm sorry." Like I was scared. I don't know. Never had a red card before, so I didn't know how to handle it. She's like, "That's fine. Next time you need to tell me." I was like, "Okay." And she was like, "Because this time there's gonna be a consequence." I was like, "Okay." And I'm like, "You know what? I'm gonna enjoy my Halloween, and then I'll have the consequence tomorrow." And she was like, "You can go Halloween trick or treating, but you can't have any candy." I was like, "What?" And she was like, "You're gonna have to give all the candy to your friends or throw it out. No candy this Halloween. Not tomorrow. Not the day after that. No candy this Halloween." So I basically got cucked that Halloween by all my friends eating all the fucking candy, and I fucking hated it, and I never got a red card again.
Damn.
But you were
Um,
saying,
I'm so sorry. Oh, you're good. We got 1, 2s, 3s, and 4s, and I remember my 5th grade teacher. Was it 5th or 4th? No, it was 5th. My 5th grade teacher. I got almost straight 3s and 4s.
wait, you didn't have grades in 5th grade?
No, he started in 6th. Real grades
Fucking
started.
ass, dude. Jesus
I
Christ.
think. Or was that
I had
4th?
report cards in like
No,
first
I think
grade.
it was 4th.
Still, like I think by 4th grade I had a report card.
I think
That's
it was
wild.
5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. We got real report cards, or it might have just been
Man.
6th, 7, 8.
That's wild. And you guys also learned that all the founding fathers were black, right?
No, that was after my time, thankfully.
Got it.
Yeah, yeah. They were still white when I was going to school.
Anyways, you were saying,
I got straight 3s and 4s,
right.
and
Fourth.
which is the lowest you can go. 4 is the lowest you can go.
Right. Bad. Bad times.
Yeah, and it was it wasn't really based on academic performance. What?
Sarah Lynn, Fishy Brand.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah, Sarah's song. Yeah. Yeah, if I ever become famous,
Poor Sarah.
Sarah's song, Fishy Bread. That was my song. That was my song.
Yeah, but you got a 4 for it because you were a shit. So
Yeah, I was.
hit-
So I got straight 3s and 4s, and I remember my teacher told me that I would grow up to be a bum and a drug addict and a criminal. And I was like, cool.
I don't think
And
you're a bum.
that's what she thought, because I got straight 3s and 4s.
You don't even hit.
And
the
here I am
set off
then.
anymore.
I know, yeah.
So you're not even that
I
much.
took back on the drugs. I got over the drugs.
I'm not a criminal. I'm not a bum, and I'm a recovering addict.
But yeah, being wrong and being ostracized is definitely really scary for a lot of people. And I think that's a primary reason why people avoid and procrastinate on making tough decisions.
I agree. I think that also I've got 2 other things here in this section, on top of repercussions. Were you going somewhere with? I feel like before the report cards, we were talking about something else, and you were going somewhere with that, and I derailed this.
Well, we were talking about the connection to the school podcast where we were
Yeah,
where
you
being
said
wrong is like a
yeah, right. Okay,
right.
yeah, and then that leads to ostracization.
Yeah. I was trying to make that
Fear.
loop, that connection loop.
Yeah. Good loop.
Tried.
I've also decided there's a couple different ways that you can face tough decisions, because there's a tough decision in other people's lives. So, do I break up with this girl or not? That's a tough decision. Impacts other people, right?
Right.
And then there's tough decisions that you make on your own, which is, do I take this job or not? Right. And so some of the decisions are difficult because you're putting other people's emotions and lives on the line, and then other ones are just yourself. And I think that I've been playing with the idea of which is more challenging, because one of them has personal repercussions and one has repercussions for other people. So I was afraid to break up with my girlfriend for a long time because I didn't want to hurt her, and I was afraid that she wouldn't be able to take care of herself without me, especially after college. And compare that to like a career decision. I guess I haven't had this yet, but like if you're too afraid to take the job, or you're not sure if you want to do it because you don't know if you want to do change, right? And you ultimately miss out on an opportunity. I put off breaking up with my girlfriend for a long time because I didn't want her life to be impacted. But I can equally see people not pursuing paths in their career because there's no repercussion to it.
Yeah,
So I can see
that's a
people
really interesting concept.
I can see people delaying the decision because they don't want the repercussions of hurting other people, and delaying the decision because there's no repercussions apart from the opportunity cost, right?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
It's kind of like, last thing. It's kind of like Hermosi, how he says it's never been easier to be successful, but it's also never been easier to do nothing.
Yes. Um, as you were talking, something kind of popped into my head. This is kind of on the fly, but I think that tough decisions, in regards to either a tough decision that you make for yourself personally and only impacts you, versus a tough decision that you have to make that also implicates other people.
Right.
I think which one of those is harder depends on your internal confidence and strength. Because I think the lower your internal confidence and strength, the more value you put in other people's perception of you. And that makes decisions that impact other people more challenging than ones that you do or don't make yourself.
Right.
Because you're already unsure in your decision.
Right.
So for you to, because you are not strong-willed. So if you're already unsure in your decision, then it's easy to create a scenario where you just don't go through with the opportunity. But if
Right.
you put your value in others, then it's much harder to make that decision because you put your value in other people more than you put your value in yourself.
So if you have more internal self-confidence, you can do either easier.
I would say so.
Right.
I would say so because your internal confidence is you commit to the decision,
Right.
and you're able to tackle that problem more quickly. But then alternatively, because you have more internal confidence, you are less concerned about the opinion and perception of other people around you based on whatever decision you have to make for
Right.
the betterment of yourself.
Right. And that links back to the definition I have here, which is if you're not afraid of committing to the decision, then it wouldn't be a tough decision in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you have high self-confidence, right, then you're not afraid. Then it's not a tough decision. It's just an important decision.
Right.
It's only tough if you don't have that internal self-confidence.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. 100%. I would agree.
Yeah. The second variable I have here that can make it difficult is facing sacrifices, because tough decisions occasionally fall between self-sacrificing or taking more from others than you may be comfortable with. Right.
Hmm.
The choice is sometimes between, do I give a little or take a little? And some people will always choose to give a little, and some people will always choose to take a little. And some people have been giving for so long they want to take once, and they're afraid it's not going to work out because they've never done it the other way. Right. It's always easier to give a little than it is to take a little. Um, for someone, I guess, who it doesn't have a crazy ego, because for someone who has a crazy ego, it's always easier to take, I guess. But sacrificing requires you to relinquish something that's important to you, which is obviously not desirable, and you don't want to give up that which is important to you, right? So if you're faced with a scenario in which you think you're going to have to give up something important to yourself, you may postpone that, right? And I think that that can materialize in one of our previous podcasts, procrastinating, right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't want to give up something that's important to you, then you're going to delay it as long as you can, and you're going to procrastinate it, right? And then you might tell someone like, "Oh yeah, I might be able to do that event, or I might be able to change the oil on your car." And then you procrastinate and procrastinate, and then you're like, "Fuck, dude, I don't want to give this up. This is my time. It's valuable to me. It's my effort. It's my work. It's my money. I
Mhm.
don't want to do this," right?
Yeah.
And then you bail out last second, and
Sure.
it leads to worse things, right? Which is a great case example in which the more self confidence that you have, the easier the decision is, because it's not so tough if you make the decision on a shorter term basis and say, "Hey man, I don't know if I have time for that. Let me think about it. I'll get back to you." Then, "Oh, probably." And then you kind of delay it, right?
Yeah.
Self-sacrificing.
Yeah. It's cool how this topic is tying into a lot of the other different foundational topics that we talked about prior, just as like a side question out.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's like an application
Yeah.
of those other
Yeah. It is.
topics, right?
Yeah.
And the next point I have ties to the opportunity cost that I just mentioned. By making a decision, you're usually selecting one path and closing off the opportunity of the other. I've personally experienced delays in decision making because the opportunity cost you forfeit by making a selection. The allure of having it all can ultimately lose you both options, and you can only have one or the other for so long before you lose the option of having both. Um, So, in the polyamorous relationship I had the decision to stay with one or either of them, or one or the other, or break up with both of them. And so if I didn't make a decision, I was gonna lose both of them, and I didn't want that. So I was faced with having to make one of the decisions, and, a lot of that was more so the opportunity cost of not having the one that I ended up not choosing, right? Obviously, a huge amount of it was, like, hurting the person who I don't choose, but if I pick one person, then I miss out on a life with this other person, and that was really painful to think about.
Yeah.
Um, so what has stopped you in particular from making difficult decisions right on the spot?
I think I've learned, at least from like my past self, that challenging decisions that I make on the spot are often based on impulsive reason. And it's r- it's interesting though, because when I make hard decisions, I try to look at the data first, like the data in my life, and I go, okay, if I go for this thing, what things do I have to give up? And then how valuable are those things to me? And what things do I have the opportunity to gain from this thing? And I'm willing to give up the things I concretely have now just for the opportunity to get this other thing. Am I willing to do that? So I try to think about it in that frame of mind, right? But I've often gotten to points as well where there isn't a clear answer. And so start to ask myself simpler questions. And I'm like, um, let's say I'm making a decision to jump into drop shipping full time and quit my job, for example.
Oddly specific.
Yeah, oddly specific. Um, and I'm having a really hard time. Let's say I'm about matching my income, but it's a little bit volatile and I don't know what to do. Right. And I have this opportunity here, but I also have stability in the job and I'm able to balance both right now and I don't really know what to do. And I'm kind of stuck in the middle ground. and I think to myself, I'm like, I honestly ask myself like stupid simple questions, and I'm like, um, should I jump for drop shipping right now? And if my instinct, like the first thing that pops into my mind is no, then I try to branch out that no. And then
Like
if
quantify it?
like try to quantify it. And then if the my first instinct is yes, then I try to quantify that. Because what I've found is this might be just a factor of my own mental manipulation working on itself in order to look for what I want to see, right? It could totally a factor of that. But what I've found is generally, if I'm really, really stuck on something, my gut will swing that like 1 or 2% either way. And 9 times out of 10, if I follow that swing, analyze it concretely, and come to a decision, I'm happy with the decision I made. Right. And obviously, I can't live like two parallel lives and then like
Right.
make a data assessment about which one turned out better. Right.
Right.
But I can say that I am satisfied or pleased with the decision I do take versus not,
Right.
right? And I generally do I try to look at just analytically what is the decision to make. And most of the time, a large majority of the time, I can figure it out just from analytically looking at the situation. But if I can't, I go with that little bit of like a gut swing and then I try to figure it out from there.
So that's a bit into the next segment. Has something stopped you from making a decision before, and what stopped you from that? We're much improved now, but years
Yeah,
ago when you hesitated on something,
definitely other people were the biggest factor for me not making a decision.
like the fear of rejection type thing?
The fear of rejection or disappointing someone else or hurting someone else's feelings or letting someone else down, like
Right.
those were always really big factors for me.
Right.
And it's interesting because I feel emotionally probably a little bit, definitely a little bit better now, but I still feel the pain of it, but um I'm able to analyze it analytically and keep myself moving forward in a way that I used to not be able to. Like other people's disappointment in me or sadness would used to just cripple me. Like I just couldn't move past it. And now like I get that and I understand with it. I take a moment to like empathize with that like little emotional part of me and then I go, but analytically X, Y, and Z needs to move forward. And that's how I operate.
Got it.
Um and it definitely makes things, I think operationally it's easier for me to get through life that way because I'm not super fixated on uh, trying to find the cleanest path forward. I'm just fixated on trying to find a path forward and then committing to that path.
Right.
And I think that just makes it operationally easier to make decisions and follow through with them
Right.
because it's not a factor anymore of what the best path is. It's just this is my path that I'm selecting to take and I will walk it.
Right.
Right? Um, but that I guess yeah, that does dive into the second section, kind of by mistake.
It's okay.
But do you want to jump into the second section? Do you?
I don't have anything more for section one.
No, I didn't either. So that was kind of a
My last point is if Yoss Verstappen was your dad, you could have been something great. Because if you grew up as a kid wanting to satisfy other people and he'd like left you at the gas station if you didn't win or something or some shit, you could have been fucking incredible. Or like a police dog.
yeah.
Ah, man. Wasted opportunity. You,
Or
only you had a terrible childhood. You could have been a elite racer.
it's interesting. I was thinking about this earlier too. This was tied to this might have been, I think this was a different Joe Rogan podcast I was listening to. But it was talking about it was a different one. But they were talking about how um certain people grow up in really, really hard childhoods and are able to pull through that. And then certain people grow up in really hard childhoods and then resort to crime and all these bad methods to try and get through their lives, right? And I think it's a really interesting discussion to try and figure out how much like coddling and safety net do you provide to someone when it becomes too much. Like when does it sounds fucked up, but when do you provide so much coddling that now the people who would have become successful don't bother becoming successful because it's too easy to reach the baseline?
Hmm.
And then when is it so little coddling that you don't have enough people pushing through the barrier to actually get enough successful people to make a flourishing society,
Right.
right? Like that's I see it as like a wall. And then, like the more you help people out and like, emotionally, just like hug them and like, safety net them through life,
Right.
the thinner that wall gets in terms of between you and feeling successful.
Right.
That wall between where you are today and you feeling successful is much thinner. And therefore, the barrier to entry to feeling successful is much lower. And then but the overall scale of people from bottom to top is still the same, right? And then
Of actual success.
of actual success,
Right.
right? and and which gets into the question of what is success. But the less safety nets you give to people, the thicker that wall becomes, and the more people kind of get stuck at the bottom. But then the people who are able to percolate to the top get to a higher level, right?
Right.
And so it's like a factor of how tough do you make life so that the people starting from the base there are enough people getting through that toughness in order to be able to have the experience to make genuine big positive impact on the world like Elon Musk, versus if you make it too thick, then you get no Elon Musks, or you get like one, which I mean, I guess there only is one Elon Musk, but you get my point, right?
I'll throw one variable in there that mixes things up,
Yeah.
which is you can give someone support or you can take the support away, and someone from either category can be successful or not, right? Let's not get bogged down in the details of success. Let's just use the arbitrary definition of success, right? Someone who has nothing, like Mike Tyson, can become, or Michael Jordan, can become like the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
Okay. And someone who has a huge leg up, like Donald Trump, can become the greatest of all time, right? And there's a whole myriad of people on both ends of the spectrum and all the way in between that don't make it. Right.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest difference is whether or not the individual person believes they can do it or not.
Yeah.
Because
I agree.
people who don't have shit and are told that they aren't shit and are told that they'll never be shit might push back on that and say, I can be. I can land a plane,
Yeah.
right? Or there's people who succumb to that and listen to it. Maybe people who are trying to please other people and they say, okay, I won't be anything, right?
Yeah.
And then there's people who are, born into like very cushy lifestyle and they're told you're going to be great. But if they don't believe they're going to be great, then they're not actually going to go anywhere and they're just going to leech off other people, right?
Yeah.
So what could be the defining factor isn't how much support they're given or not, but it's just how much belief they have that they're actually capable of doing it. And not self-belief in the sense of like a bloated ego, but a sense of belief in the fact that like the only difference between me and Michael Jordan is how much effort he puts in.
Yeah.
So I can put in more effort and I can make it there, right? My parents were born in a trailer park, right? And grew up in the slums. And then they made it to the middle class life that I got to grow up with, right?
Yeah.
And so I had maybe a middle level of coddling, right? Where I wasn't exactly told that I was going to be great. I was just told that I was going to be an engineer.
Mm.
And I did that, but I still know that I'm capable of more. But there's other people who grew up in similar settings to me who were told the same shit, but they don't really think that they're capable of more. Like when I talk to like Ryan and I go,
Yeah.
"Hey man, what are your career aspirations?" He's like, "I don't know, probably become like a level 3 manager and vibe until retirement." And I'm like, "That's your whole life? That's the whole game you want to play? You don't want to like build businesses and like travel around, the states or other countries and like have a conglomerate, like you don't want something bigger than yourself?" And he's like, "No." And I'm like, "Why not?" And he's like, "I don't know. I don't like I'm not interested, but also like I don't know if I can do all that shit." Right? But when I think of the difference between me and Elon Musk, the only difference between me and Elon is he has a factory to sleep on the floor of, right? Like I think I can land a plane. It's that whole thing that the girlfriends ask their boyfriends, like, "Do you think you could land a plane if you were up in the sky and the pilot passed out?" Right?
Yeah.
I think the people who say yes are probably more likely to reach success regardless of how much coddling they have than people who say no.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why there's more successful men than women, because the women are asking the boyfriends saying, "Oh, like you think you can land a plane?" And most of them aren't going to reach those same heights as the guys who say yes. A lot of the guys who say yes aren't going to make it anywhere because they don't have the actual impetus to land a plane. But I think there's more men than women who genuinely believe that they can achieve greatness and then go
Yeah.
and do it.
I think that also gets into a factor that there are genuine differences between how women function and how men function.
Yeah.
And that's been very mixed up and fucked around and put in a blender as of the past 10 years. But I
What
think
is a woman?
right, exactly. And but I think that the facts have remained true for thousands of years, and there's a lot of data and statistical evidence that people neglect. And it's not to say that a man's way of approaching life is more valuable than a woman's, but there are different values that each of them provide, which is why a relationship between the two works so well,
Right.
right?
Right.
At least traditionally speaking.
Yeah.
Um,
In terms of the mentality of landing a plane, I've never seen a genuinely successful person shit on someone for thinking that they can land a plane. I've never seen that. I've
yeah,
only ever seen
yeah,
people go, "Yeah, dude, fucking go for it."
right,
Right?
right.
Man or woman, right?
I
Or a
also I
successful
want
woman. But I bet those successful women say they can land a plane.
probably. I also want to drop in this one quote. Shout out to Daniel Boer from work. He works in logistics, but he has a really good quote at the end of his email that I like. And it says,
Bitches ain't shit. Daniel Boer.
that is not what it says. It says, men will do nothing until they have to, and then they'll do anything.
That's
And
good.
I like that quote because if you can put yourself in that mindset of I have to do it all the time, that really is what gets you going. That's what pushes your success. That's what pushes the bar up, right? But if you feel as though you don't have to, that's when you stay stagnant, right? I really like that quote, you know?
Yeah. It's like Bill Gates only hired lazy people because he knew that if you give a lazy person a task, they're gonna figure out a system. They're gonna work 60-hour work days or I guess 60-hour work weeks to figure out a way so that they don't have to do this task anymore. They're gonna automate it so they don't have to deal with it again. So they'll work really hard for 3 weeks so that they don't have to touch anything for 6 months.
I think it was Patrick Bet David. I saw a clip of him talking, and he was like the most terrifying people in the world are very intelligent, lazy people because they go through life just chilling, riding the bar, but they have an IQ of 200. And if you fuck with them, they suddenly jump out of that laziness, that low bar threshold that society puts for them,
Right.
and they figure out a way to fuck you right around, and you'll never figure it out, and you'll never be able to outsmart them.
Yeah.
And it's really funny because in this clip, he was like, just stay away from the smart, lazy people. He was like, don't fucking talk to them. Don't make friends with them. It's just
so funny.
it's so funny.
That's
But yeah.
what if you can inspire a smart, lazy person to get them to work with you?
Yeah,
That'd be crazy.
that would be wild. Any smart, lazy people want to come on the podcast, figure out how your brain works.
Okay, segment 2. You ready?
Yeah.
Segment 2 is on how to tackle the issue at hand. So I'm coming to a conclusion of a tough decision. I would make the case that everyone involved will be able to process the decision most efficiently if all parties have very clearly dedicated a lot of thought to the choice. They've explained their positions with full transparency, and the proper respect is given to the party that's receiving the less favorable outcome. So respect the person who you're, kind of letting down. For example, when you're listing a home for sale and receiving competing offers, it's common practice for the listing agent to accept the offer they like best and move forward without notifying the owner of the offer that was not accepted. So you submit an offer to me to buy my house, and I end up going up with someone else, and you never hear from me again, right? That actually bothered Grace and I early on with her first client, and Tyler told us it was commonplace. I argued that just because it was the norm doesn't mean it was correct. He agreed, but told me that eventually I would come around because it's standard practice, and I would eventually be doing it too. And I've bitterly held on to this, and I'm adamant that I will never reject an offer without respectfully detailing to the offerer why theirs wasn't accepted or why another was accepted over it. Funny enough, while Grace and I were making her Google profile for real estate to start garnering Google reviews, I noticed that Tyler's 11 Google reviews only had one review below 5 stars. And that detailed a complaint about a time when he did not respond to that person's offer and instead selected someone else's without notifying them. This dragged his overall Google rating from a 5 to a 4.6. Bitterly held on to that. So, with that long-winded intro out of the way, what is your strategy for tackling difficult decisions? You've kind of laid it out already.
Yes, I've waited out a little bit, but it's also very similar to my tactics to battle procrastination. Because they
Awesome.
kind of fall into the same boat for me.
Right.
So they're very, very similar concepts. And the main being to generate a sense of anxiety in myself in order to come to a conclusion about the decision.
Because so wait, you're generating anxiety to get rid of the anxiety of making a decision?
I'm generating anxiety in order to get myself anxious enough in order to tackle the problem right then and there.
Huh.
So because I know that I have the prospect of feeling better after I make the decision.
So it's kind
But
of like
it's
okay.
hard for me to get sometimes it's hard for me to get a leg started and get a leg up on making the decision if I feel like I have other tasks at hand that I also need to accomplish.
Okay.
So, like, an example being is like that do it now thing that I repeat in my head,
Right.
right? That generates a sense of urgency, a small dose of anxiety to get me to feel as though the decision that I need to make, the hard decision I need to make, needs to be completed as soon as possible, which generates enough anxiety for me to actually get into the geared mindset to be able to analyze it analytically and
Mhm.
come to a conclusion, right?
So it's almost like you're favoring the short, intense burst of anxiety over the low level anxiety for the length of which time it takes you to make a decision.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah.
That's interesting.
I definitely favor a smaller short-term dose of anxiety if I can generate it, um, over like a long-term, I don't know what to do, I just kind of want to avoid it. With smaller decisions, sometimes I just avoid it. For example, sometimes I'll pull up my phone and there's 6 unread text messages from like, a bunch of different people or 10 unread text messages. And I just put my phone down because it's
Can
just a
I
small decision.
can I make a confession here?
Yeah.
Grace's sister Anna, her fiance Ralph. I'm good buds with Ralph. I love Ralph, right? He sends me memes on Instagram almost daily, and I never open them.
I have 10
Some
people
of them are
send me nudes on Instagram.
some
I've
of them
never opened
dude,
them.
some of them are really good reels, some of them are really
Yeah.
good photos. It's all stuff that we've talked about and have in common, and he remembers about me and intentionally like, he remembers to send them to me and stuff, and I feel so bad for not opening a single fucking one of them, but I have the same brain disease where I have a bunch of shit in my Instagram DMs. Instagram DMs are ethereal. They're not real. I don't touch them, right? If it's not an iMessage, I ignore it.
The last thing I read is in like November of last year.
Yeah, I have so many. The Instagram noted like the app has fucking 150 notifications on it,
Yes.
and I feel so bad because he's a nice guy, and he doesn't know that I have holes in my brain. But I'm too nice.
Yeah.
I don't want to say anything because I don't want to be rude.
But the thing is that I try to save the anxiety generation tactic for things that I see as hard decisions.
Like
Because
worth taking on the anxiety.
right, because I feel as though if it's like abusing the tactic and then it becomes worthless.
Right.
And that happened with me with alarms. Like
Yeah.
if I were to I like started just abusing alarms and I had like 1 alarm, then 2 alarms, then 3 alarms, then 4 alarms.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, like each time I add an alarm, it works for a week,
Yeah.
but then it stops working.
Yeah.
Right. And so what is the baseline of why I can't wake up in the morning? Right. And so that's what I started to tackle and think about rather than how do I apply one solution constantly and then just keep trying to iterate on that solution when it's clearly having a failure point that I'm having to push past every single time, right?
Right.
And so I don't want because I only have a couple of tricks in my toolbox right now for how to get myself in the gear of making a tough decision. And so I like to save those for when it is really critical for me to make a tough decision.
Yeah.
Because if I were I feel as though if I were to use it for smaller decisions all the time to get me to like watch the Instagram reels in my DMs,
Right. You're gonna.
then it would
It's not-
become meaningless for the things that actually matter.
I did the
Right.
same thing with songs for running.
Mm.
So every 2K test, a 2K is 6.5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
6 if you're fast. Mine was 6.5 minutes. But I had a playlist to listen for the 2K. So I would know, okay, I'm only going to pick 3 songs. And I know that when the third song starts, I'm almost done. And so the first 2 songs have to be hype, and the third song has to be an absolute banger, right? And so have you ever seen This Is Not Happening with Ari Shafir? It's the comedy shorts. Joe Diaz does a bunch of them.
Probably.
Their intro song is called Run the Jewels. That was my hype song.
Yeah,
That was my I called it, it's an anchor because it's at the end of the piece. And so like in relays, you have your fastest guy be the anchor or the last guy to go because it's going to carry you across the finish line. You don't want the slowest guy doing the last 10 meters while everyone else has their crazy dudes catching them, you know? That was my anchor song. And it worked really well for me for the 2Ks. And I was like, dude, you know what? A 2K is only 6.5 minutes. These other training pieces we're doing, okay, they're like 3-minute pieces, but we're doing 10 of them. So like I'm going to be erging for like 30 minutes. So why don't I use the song for those too? Because then I can make it through those pieces easier, right? And that exact same thing happened to me. It diluted it. And then I got into my next 2K and the song came on and I was like, oh my God, I'm dying. Fuck. Like I'm not amped up anymore. Like this song didn't do it for me. So I had to find another song. And eventually I got to the point where I was like, you know what, just fucking, when I got like past the halfway point, I would just rip out my earbuds and like just raw dog it. But yeah, same thing. I understand that. It's
Yeah.
interesting though, because usually when you talk to people about solutions, like how to solve anxiety, their answers usually aren't, well, I just give myself so much anxiety I can't ignore it. Like usually it's the opposite direction where it's like, oh, I try to calm down and think rationally. And you're like, no, I want to panic. And then that's the
Yeah, well,
impetus to get it
because
started.
the anxiety, like Hormozy talks about, and Jeff Bezos talks about the same thing. It's too many options and not knowing what to do,
Right.
right? I'm getting that correct, right? It's having so many options that you don't know what to do,
Yes.
right? That's anxiety.
Yes.
And so what I try to do is I generate so much anxiety that I just have to do something, right? Because you can have enough anxiety to where you're just panicked about the problems.
Yeah.
But if you become panicked enough, in my little mind, I'm picturing myself a little
fucking
panic ball,
rat brain.
right? I'm like one of those little like cat toys that roll around on the floor,
Yeah, yeah.
and with more anxiety you got, the faster it fucking rolls around,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It gets to a certain point where that little cat ball in my brain is gonna hit something meaningful, right? And then I'm gonna see a small little result, and I'll go, okay, cool. I can just start somewhere, right? It's this like primitive caveman realization. Every fucking time I have to make a hard decision, I have to have this caveman realization of, if I start somewhere, it will feel better.
Okay. Yeah, it's just fucking, we have such different approaches. I think that yours is like escalate and mine is de-escalate.
Mine
Polar opposite
escalate,
direction.
panic, do.
Thank God you've never been arrested. You'd fucking,
Oh, yeah.
you'd Floyd out right away. You'd fucking try to run or fight. Fucking tap. So, okay.
They'll have a videotape of me with a zin in the bottom of my lip on Daily Wire in like 2 years, and they'll be like, it was his fault.
Yeah, they'll be like, this is why you don't resist arrest. You're just like, well, I like, they're interviewing after.
They found a lethal amount of nicotine in his beds too.
So my strategy is a little different. It's the polar opposite, actually. I have a 5-step plan to break down the difficult decision rationally, right? Because it's so funny that we heard the same quote from Hormozy and took it different ways. Because the quote is, anxiety is having too many options and not having a priority order.
Yeah.
So the response to that is just make a priority order and then just start checking off the boxes. And yours is like, what if I overload it with too many options and I have to do something? Because there's so many that I don't know what's important.
Well, because once I start, if I get into it and I
You'll
start
be like,
throwing-
this is retarded. I should be doing this other thing.
Right, exactly. And then the priority order generates automatically based on the anxiety. Because as soon as you start
so funny.
something, I just learn through like doing it and iteration. And so I just start doing something.
Yeah.
And then when I realize the thing I'm doing is stupid and I should be doing something else,
Uh-huh.
like that is my mental clarity in that moment.
Okay. This is fucking chaotic.
It's so fucking stupid.
Mine starts with dedicating critical thought to the undeniable benefits and costs of each decision.
I don't think I've ever done that.
But it's basically start with pros and cons, right?
Yeah.
Not emotionally swayed one way or the other, but like tangible benefits and deficits to each, right? So in this girlfriend example, the benefits and deficits to each were, okay, well, I have to hurt one of them, so that's a cost
Mhm.
of whichever way I go. The benefit one way is, well, she's going to be an engineer, so she's gonna like, I'm gonna have to pay as much in rent. The other one wants to go into psychology, so I might have to help out with rent because they have to go through extra training before they're gonna make money, whatever, and I might have to pay for that, right?
Mhm.
One of them's gonna have crazy student loans, one of them's not. One of them does athletics and I can train with, and the other doesn't. Like those are tangibles, right? Those are non-emotional differences, right? The second is recognizing the impact that each decision will have to each party involved, right? So it's not just the cost that I pay by hurting one of them, but the impact that it's going to have on their life afterward, positive and negative, right? And so using that information, I form a decision, and then I share this decision with trusted sources for third-party feedback, right? So similar to how Trump, like, have you heard he talks to everybody about when he's faced with a choice, he'll ask the fucking waiter at the restaurant what they think.
Yeah.
Like he polls everybody, right? And I think he does it because as a political campaign, political member, his decisions should reflect what the American people want, right? So it's actually beneficial for him to ask people what they think because he can kind of get a scale for like, am I doing what the people want or not, right? That doesn't really apply in my sense, but the reason I do it is because I might not be thinking of an angle that I, haven't considered before.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else might have a really great, I might be too close to the forest to see the trees. They might point something out that I haven't considered. And so after I get that feedback and it confirms or denies what I'm already thinking, I can commit to a single path and present that to those involved, right?
Yeah.
Those are my 5 steps. So pros and cons, weigh the repercussions for everyone, not just myself. Share that information, form a plan, share it with others to see what's up, and then pick it.
I think it's interesting because your process is similar to mine after I get through the like 5 to 30-minute anxiety inducing period. Like
Well,
the anxiety inducing period I use to kick myself into gear to start doing something. But once I start working through things, then I feel as though I'm in the task. And then I'm able to do my analytical analysis of what needs to happen, the pros and cons weighing and stuff like that. But it's interesting because like to get myself into that frame of mind, it's harder for me to get myself into that frame of mind when I'm calmed down about it initially. If I get myself super anxietied up about it, if I really don't know what to do, I will do this, right? I save it for those situations where I really don't know what to do. I
right.
get myself anxietied up, so I just start doing something. And that, because it forces me to do something, it gets myself in the point of mental clarity where I can then calm back down and make my decision. Right.
So, but okay, so this subject is how to tackle the issue at hand.
Yeah.
So it's not how to determine what the tough decision is, but it's how to handle the tough decision once you found it, right? So it's kind of like what's
But I use it to find my solution to the tough decision.
so once you have the tough decision in front of you, you tweak out until you figure out what the best path.
If I feel as though I'm procrastinating about making a decision,
Got it.
or sorry, if committing to a solution,
Let's go to house hunting. When you picked the duplex, right?
Yeah.
You had 10 different options. It was wait for Mason to move out from his parents and live with him. It was live with Alexis in the duplex. It was live on your own somewhere. There's like 5 different options, right?
Right.
And so that's a tough decision that you had to make, right?
Sure.
And so did you just stack it up with the infinite number of options and start looking into all of them and slowly like figure out from there what made sense and what didn't?
What I did was I internally felt the instinctual urge to do another task. And I actively fought that, put myself into an anxious loop to feel anxious, like I have to make the decision now.
Got it.
I started looking somewhere. And then after about 5-10 minutes, because I was already in the task, I'd already gone over my little anxiety mountain range. And so at that point, I was like, okay, I'm in the task. I can see I'm making progress. But now I'm thinking about it, and I think I should be doing X, Y, and Z based on these data analytics. And let me look at this aspect over here and try to tie that in. So it kind of gets me. It's odd because getting over like the little anxiety wall gets me into a place where I can then start from my baseline and rationalize. But what I found happens is that if I try to just start with rational thinking, I'll put around, and beat around the bush, trying to just doing this little like it's like a God, what's the word for it? It's like mental masturbation,
Right.
where I convince myself that I'm doing something about the problem, but then analytically, when I look at what I've done later, I realize I've done nothing.
Got it.
Right, and that process I've found at least for me, I spend a lot more time mentally masturbating than I do if I build up my anxiety, just jump into it for 5 minutes, and then get into like a semi flow state and then start. Like my mental masturbation could last an hour or an hour and a half,
Right.
right? But my high anxiety period, I don't want to last for more than 5 minutes, right? And so that is
How do you induce that? How do you induce your anxiety?
that's from the mentality of like I have to do it now. This is really critical. Like I need to get this done. I have to do it. I have to do it. I have to do it. I literally repeat that in my head until I have so much anxiety that I have to do something. And then that period lasts 5 minutes. But because it's almost like I'm completely detached from the task in those 5 minutes. I'm just so anxious that I'm doing something.
Because you're spiraling.
Yeah,
It's just an anxiety attack.
yeah. I'm giving myself an anxiety attack for 5 minutes because I know that at the end of that anxiety attack, I'll be able to reset and then get to my baseline. But if I try to start from my baseline without giving myself that little anxiety attack, I find that I mentally masturbate for a lot longer than I would if I just give myself a 5-minute anxiety attack.
Does your therapist watch our podcast?
No, and she shouldn't have those.
I feel like it would benefit her career, probably. Or
I
maybe
don't know what would benefit. It would
maybe
inform.
end it. Maybe it would end her career. Maybe she'd actually fix you, and you wouldn't have to pay her anymore. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
If it works for you, then there's nothing wrong with it.
That's right.
The name broke, right? Doesn't work for everyone, right?
Yeah.
But that's what I have for how to tackle the issue at hand. Do you have anything else?
I've
Did you
that's
just
pretty
have
much it.
Did you just have the word panic written down in scribble under the?
I had do it now, force yourself to commit.
It's your whole bullet point for this
It was
segment.
actually 2 bullet points.
Just
Do it now was 1
You
bullet
feel
point.
what I've written for this. All right,
Hey, I had a good spiel though.
let's go. Okay, it's like your fucking like Viet Cong sleeper agent code word.
Well, I didn't have the
Saying wake up.
I had so little time to write my sheet. I didn't even have the time to give myself an anxiety attack about it. So I just
Perfect.
mentally masturbated with 2 bullet points.
All right, Jesus. Okay, segment 3: how to be certain you aren't doing it too early. Okay, so we've discussed how important it is to not delay making difficult decisions and how to effectively weigh your choices before making them. Suppose this feedback is followed explicitly. So you drive home tonight and stop for gas on the way. While you're filling up, a hooker shouts you from the curb and offers to go home with you for free. You weigh your decisions, meaning you get to spend the night with a woman and she gets to spend the night in a shelter. You recognize the impact each decision has, meaning if you say no, you go home lonely and she sleeps out in the cold. You form a decision and ask the guy at the next gas pump over what he thinks of the situation. He laughs and says he thinks you guys should get married. You commit to the single path that this must be, and it's love at first sight. You get on one knee and ask her to marry you. This is an extreme example of how horrifically wrong decision making can go if not enough critical thought is applied to your choice. So you can't just follow. I thought we were going to have similar solutions to how to tackle the issue. So I wrote this.
somewhere. I just have a small 5-minute excerpt at the start where I'm in extreme anxiety.
So when the girl shouts at you from the curb, you shit your pants and then you go on with it, right?
right.
Or do you shit your pants because you're at a gas station?
Potentially both.
I was talking to a good friend about this the other day, and fuck, I was like, oh, she has like hot girl tummy issues, and I was like, oh, Sandra has hot girl tummy issues, and she was like, what? And I was like, hey, she has himself at gas stations. She was like, what? I was
Who
like,
was this?
I'm not gonna say it on air, but I was like, yeah, when he's on his way to important events and he's like right close by, he shits himself and has to go home. And she was like, I once shit myself at the airport. And I was like, what? She was like, yeah, I was waiting for my flight and it happened. I just went back outside. I had my dad take me home. I canceled the flight.
That's amazing.
But okay, I wrote this assuming that we would have similar strategies. Let's just take into account they're a little bit different, right? But the point of this write-up is you shouldn't just follow what we have verbatim.
Don't follow what I have.
Don't follow what you have verbatim. Don't make decisions too quickly. Because I feel like when I was writing this, I was like, okay, cool. I have a strategy and a plan to make tough decisions. So I can make a tough decision and then I can decide quickly, right? But if you have high internal confidence, like we talked about earlier, you can take a tough decision and get rid of the tough part because you get rid of the fear associated, right? Apart from the anxiety. So you get rid of the fear associated, and it's not a tough decision, and that it's now just an important decision, right?
Yeah.
And although we have a strategic breakdown of how to make that important decision, I still think it's important to dedicate critical thought to it because it's still an important decision, even if you know the breakdown of how to get through it, right?
Yeah.
So this isn't meant to be like a speed run through making difficult decisions, right? Like if you're having an issue with your girlfriend, you shouldn't break up with her on the spot, right? Or, if your boss says something that you don't like at work, you shouldn't quit or shit on his desk, right? Like you shouldn't cut to the chase. So how are you certain that you aren't making a decision too early?
Your breakdown was really interesting because I thought of it from the perspective of my whole goal in decision making is to try and avoid the mental masturbation procrastination period in order to get into my flow state where I'm then able to analyze critically and take my time and look at all the rationale and reasoning, right? And so my answer to the question was directly reflective of when do I start my anxiety period? And so my answer was, is it ever too early?
To start your anxiety?
Right. Because
Dear
for
God.
me, my whole goal is to eliminate my initial starting from my baseline and then working from there because I found that I mentally masturbate around the topic and I don't really get anywhere.
Got it.
And so for me, my answer is I focus on it's never too early to start making the decision because it's never too early to have a mini panic attack.
I should have been more specific with the prompt.
I know. No, it's okay.
It's never too early to have a panic attack? What the fuck?
I start mine at 6 a.m. when I wake up late for my alarm.
All right.
I know I fucked up this.
Okay, so
whole
let's.
back
Well,
half.
all right. It's now you've read your bullet point for this sentence. You're gonna riff anyways. So let's riff into this from a different perspective. Once you've had your fucking panic attack, right? You're no longer a puddle on the floor freaking out. You're sitting in your chair making a decision, right? And you go through your decision making process. How do you know that you haven't rushed to conclusions? How do you know that you haven't speed runned it and it's actually not really that well thought through, and you don't know until you make the decision and it comes back in your face?
For big decisions, I'll never make them same day. Even if I feel as though I've gone through all of the analysis and looking at every single detail and thinking critically about everything, I always sleep on it every time.
What's the benefits of sleeping on it?
I find that when I wake up the next day and I think about the decision again, I found like 10 out of 10 times that I've either missed something, I've misconstrued something based on an opinion, or I now, with a fresher mind, think more clearly about what I wrote down or what I analyzed through.
Right.
And so I never make decisions same day. So my minimum threshold is 24 hours for hard decisions.
Right.
Or like if I start the night before, it might be like 18 hours or something like that.
End of the following business day. One business day.
Yeah, right.
Right.
But I always sweep cycle it for sure, at least once.
Interesting.
I've just found too many times that when I go to make a tough decision and I don't sleep on it, it's not that every time I make the wrong decision, but I make the wrong decision enough times to where even if the percentage is small, because they are all big decisions, that percentage has a lot of weight. It's like being wrong 99% of the time or 100% of the time, like that Hormozy thing where he talks about people shutting you down. You know what I'm referencing?
No.
So when he has his example of like you bring a girl home for the holidays and your parents tell you, oh, she's not the one, she's not the one. And then you bring a different one the next holidays and your family says, oh, she's not the one, she's not the one. And they're right every single time until the one time it matters and you find your wife. And then that's why they're right 99% of the time, but wrong 100% of the time.
Right.
Right. Because they were wrong the only time it mattered.
Right.
And so I try to apply that concept when it comes to decision making and trying to reduce the times that I'm wrong when it really, really matters by adding that sleep cycle into my thought and analysis process.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah.
What's the last decision that you had to sleep on? Because now you can kind of say, well, I've had important decisions because I've had to sleep on it.
Probably a couple months back when I acquired the business from my mentor, the dropshipping business.
Mm-hmm.
That was something that I slept on.
Why?
And I'm glad that I did, because the first day I got really excited about it and then I pulled myself back and I was able to rationally reason through it.
So excitement substitute for anxiety.
Yeah, in this case it was because
It's good.
I wasn't procrastinating on it because I was excited about it, right?
Right.
A lot of the hard decisions I have the instinct to procrastinate on, which is why I introduced that little anxiety.
So this was a positive decision where you're deciding whether or not
Yeah,
to take
a challenging decision, but a positive one.
Right. As opposed to a negative decision of I have to negatively implicate someone for something.
Right.
Right.
Right. So for that, I was really, really excited about it. And then I started to get some cold feet after it, and I was a little bit worried, and I could see myself fluctuating. And so I was like, sleep on it. And the next day I woke up and I was able to go back to what I reasoned through.
Right.
And I had more questions like, then I started asking questions about like, what is the real ad spend here? What is the return on sales after fulfillment? I know that gross sales looks like this, but I started asking more questions that dove into the analytics of things that I didn't even really think to ask because I was just so excited about the moment.
Right.
right? And I think that over time I'll be able to pull that timeline into a shorter frame, right?
Right.
But right now I'm still just like learning and developing, and so I know that for this point in my life, I need that sleep cycle in order to come back the next day and look at it more rationally,
Right.
right? And so that was a decision that actually kind of went up and down a little bit because my mentor was a little bit variable on price. And so I didn't really know what was doing. And so I kept kind of introducing these sleep cycles along through the decision. Right. And so it took longer than I wanted to actually acquire it, like a week and a half or something like that.
Right.
Whereas like it could have probably taken 2 or 3 days. But that process, that's the last time I had to make a hard decision where I had to introduce a sleep cycle. And I'm glad that I did,
Right.
because if I just gotten cold feet and then completely bailed out of it, then I don't know if I would have had the opportunity to come back and be like, "Hey, oh, I gotta change my mind." You know what I mean? Right? Like I'm glad that I was able to be firm-footed in my excitement, but also have the reservation to not immediately pounce on it 110% and then pull myself back sleep cycle and then come at it critically.
Right.
But
So it was weighing the opportunity cost of I'm not going to be able to have this opportunity again alongside the physical cost of this costs a lot of money and it's going to take a lot of my time.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Got it.
What about you?
What about me?
What's the last hard decision you had to make? Getting into real estate?
Could be. That could have been it. I think that might have been it. I can't remember a time more recently that I've
Yeah.
had a
I mean, it hasn't
difficult
been too
decision to
long.
make. Well, yeah,
5 months.
I was just trying to be most accurate with it. Well, 5 months since the bar died,
Right.
but I didn't decide to do real estate for like a month after that or 2
Mhm.
because I was doing the next wave kava. The I started to put together the
Yes. Yeah.
what's it called?
The,
Let me give someone
like
advice.
the business growth.
Yeah, what's it called? When you're like I think it's just
A
supposed to be
consultant?
consultant business, yeah. Yeah. Um that was probably the last time I had to really think a long time about something to make sure.
Mhm.
Um but ultimately, I don't know. I don't know because it wasn't a tough decision in the sense that I was concerned with the outcome. It was more so a decision of what makes the most sense.
And that's kinda how it was for me with the dropshipping thing too.
Yeah.
Like, it was a hard decision.
Mhm. Well, it was harder for you because you had to put me down to do it.
Oh,
Once that
talking about that, yeah.
I thought that's what we were talking
Sorry,
Right.
I was referencing the
The bar
dropshipping.
death.
Right, yeah, no, the bar death was definitely, like, a big hard decision. In terms of my most recent decision, I was,
Right.
uh,
Mm.
relating to you in that sense where it
What do next?
it wasn't super tough, like, I was like, "Oh my god, what's gonna happen?" It was just a challenging decision that I had to use critical analysis in order to come to a conclusion about.
Yeah. Yeah, it was that. It was what makes most sense. What should most of my time be going toward,
Right.
right? And it was difficult to put those variables together because what I wanted to do was continue with the brick and mortar business. And I think what was challenging to me was figuring out, am I going to stay with this business path? Am I going to pivot into something different? And are either viable, right? And neither are viable if I don't have enough savings, which I didn't have enough savings because Grace hadn't started making money in real estate.
Yeah.
Technically hasn't. So I was recognizing that my savings was going down every month. And if my savings are already going down every month and then I quit my job to pursue a business, I'm gonna make it like 4 weeks before I have to get a credit card.
Yeah.
And stack the shit out of a credit card. So ultimately the decision was, okay, well, I have to increase my income. Which path am I gonna take to do that? And then it was easy from there. But yeah, that was probably the last tough decision. But I don't know. I think generally speaking, I don't think I've had many tough decisions in my life that have really needed, like, a lot of thought, like, a lot of dedicated thought. That was probably one of them.
I think probably a majority of the other ones have just come from relationship stuff for me.
Yeah.
I think it's like when to tell the person I don't want to be with them anymore.
Yeah. That's a tough one, though.
It is, it is. And I think that's consistently been the hardest in my past because in my past I've consistently put other people on a pedestal,
Right.
right? And it wasn't until probably I mean, it's constantly developing. So it's like, even 6 months ago I was struggling with that,
Right.
you know? And I just get a little bit better every day and then I see the reflection over the course of years.
Right.
Um, but I think analytically looking back, always my hardest decisions have been related to women.
Telling someone that you don't want to be with them anymore is difficult. And in fairness, I haven't had to do that since, like, high school.
Yeah.
Because I dated Elizabeth for, like, 7 years through high school and college. And, I felt toward the end that I didn't wanna be in a relationship with her anymore, but then when we started dating Emily, it was like, most of my problems were getting solved
Yeah.
because Emily was bolstering a lot of the weak points in that relationship. So it
Yeah.
was like a whole relationship with the 3 of us. Um, but I haven't had to make that decision in a long time, but I can recognize how difficult it is because I had it forced on me with, like, a 2-week deadline all at
Yeah.
once.
Yeah. And a very hard one.
Right.
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 Yeah.
So I can recognize, but the benefit to that is I didn't have a choice. I had a choice, but, like, I didn't have a choice but to make a choice, right? Like,
Yeah.
I was told, "Hey, it's time, figure it out." As opposed to you're in this open-ended relationship for an unlimited period of time, and it only ends if you pull the trigger, and you aren't happy. What are you gonna
Yeah.
do? So I think that each of our positions are uniquely challenging or were uniquely challenging.
Right. What I try to do with that anxiety burst is to create that deadline in my head. Because with like a lot of the hard decisions that I kind of think about, it's like, well, you could stay another week in the relationship, right?
Right.
And so it's like then
Procrastinate.
right, that's when I think the decision becomes like the decision only becomes harder the longer you put it off,
Yeah,
which is why I try to create that little anxiety ball to get myself going.
that's crazy. I never wanna feel that again. But that's part of the
I don't either. Like it's a terrible
well, you kind of simulate the anxiety, I mean. Like, you've never had that anxiety.
sure, but it's not like drawn out over the course of weeks. You
Right,
know what I mean?
right,
Right? Like and like I remember, especially with my high school girlfriend, it was very challenging because that was the longest relationship I'd had, and I wasn't really breaking up because I didn't like her anymore. I was breaking up with her because her family hated me so much and like pointed the finger at me for every single little thing without reason
right,
that it started to impact my ability to actually have a relationship with her.
right.
And so like that decision was very challenging.
Yeah.
Um but it's actually really funny. I got so I forgot that I did this in high school, junior year. I wrote a letter to myself. It was for a class assignment. Like it wasn't something that I inspired or anything like that. It was a professor who was like, "Write this letter. I'll mail it to you in 5 years."
Oh, that's cool.
And I was like, "Okay, cool. Like I'll do this." And about 8 months ago, he reached out to me and he was like, "Hey, it's been 5 years." So I wrote the senior year. Yeah,
End
senior
of
year.
high school.
Yeah, end of high school. I wrote the senior year, and it has been 5 years. And he reached out to me and he was like, "Hey, I have your letter." I was like, "Oh fuck!" Like I'd completely forgotten about it entirely. And he was like, "What's your current mailing address?" And I was like, "Oh, like 500 blah 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 blah." And he sent me the letter, and like I didn't open it for like 3 days.
Why?
Because I figured there would be something in there about my high school relationship, and I didn't remember what, and I didn't remember the context of the letter at all. But I figured I'd have something in there, and I'd also figured I'd had dreams in there and like goals and aspirations. And so I figured it was gonna be not negative, but emotional to go back in time like that.
And you were avoiding that?
I was avoiding that.
Why?
because I wanted to be in a frame of mind where I was ready to go on a potential journey back to that time. And um I wanted to be alone. I wanted it to be quiet. I wanted to have the I wanted to have a guaranteed flexible time from an hour before and an hour after, like just plus or minus window
Mhm.
of when I could open this letter and whatever was in it, I could just spend that time to analyze it. Because it was I hadn't really done that before,
Mm.
right? Like this was so I wanted to have the opportunity to fully soak into whatever the letter had.
Right.
And so I waited a few days and I opened it up and I opened it up and the front half was like old stuff that I'd written to myself. And so I was reading through it and it was like, it was a lot of stuff about like shooting for success and shooting for your dreams and continuing your racing passion and a lot of stuff like that. It was really good. And I turn
Are
it
we gonna start sim racing again?
we can. I do love racing. I always will.
I
But
missed the sim racing. We took it down for the hurricane.
yeah, true. It's back up. It's back up and running.
All right, the back.
But I I'm reading the front of this letter and I see that there's writing on the back. And I flipped the letter over and then I remembered what I'd done with this letter. The front half I had written to myself. And the back half I had given to my girlfriend at the time, and I had put it in the envelope without ever reading the back half.
Wait, you had put it in the envelope without
I'd
reading
given
the
it to
back?
my professor without ever reading what she wrote to me.
Wait, she wrote you on the back
Yes.
of the letter you wrote yourself.
Yes. I asked
Uh,
her to write me a letter that I would read in 5 years.
and this is while you were
On the
still dating.
back. Yes.
And your professor didn't open the letter.
No, no, no. I sealed it and I gave it to him. I
Got
put
it.
my
And
name
so he
on it.
kept it sealed.
Right.
Got it. Do you know it's illegal to read another person's mail?
Yeah.
It's a felony.
We learned that in Form
See,
A.
all right, to the back. Back of the letter.
Back of the letter. I had completely forgotten that I'd had her write a letter to me that I had never read.
Hmm.
After I flipped it, I was like, I gave her this paper one night, and I was like, write me something, and then put it in the envelope when you're done and seal the envelope.
Hmm.
And so I turned it over and I paused because I was like this was more than what I expected. I expected it to just be like a lot of aspirational goals and like some things I'm still picking up, or like me telling myself like I hope you're still doing this, and like me being like I ain't doing that, right? Like stuff like that, right? But this was like a complete out of left field. Like I totally forgot. And I read through that and like I wasn't like super emotional about it or anything. But I read through it and it was like it was really interesting to read what she'd written to me because it was a few months before we actually broke up. And at that time, she was also talking about trying to stay in the relationship through college as well. And so it was really I kind of just like shut my emotional brain off for it.
Why?
I was just scared, I think.
Of what?
I just didn't I created the time for myself to be ready to jump back into it, but then I actually got into the pool and I realized that I didn't know if I wanted to be in the pool anymore, you know? And it was like, reading that letter,
What
it
is
was a
positive stuff?
it was all positive stuff. Yeah, but it was just like the one line that stuck out to me is like, "I know you're gonna get that 250 GTO one day." That was like one of her closing lines. And it was like it was really cool to see a physical documentation of past me with very similar goals to today me,
Right.
right? Like that was a really cool connection. But it was also definitely emotional to like go on the roller coaster, like put myself back in the shoes that I was in high school through the sweater, right?
Right.
Um, and I read it that once, and I kind of just like took 30 minutes to like absorb it and think about it. And I thought about it, and I took a picture of the front and back, and I texted her the pictures, and I was like, "Hey, hope you're doing well. You know, no clue where you're at, or if you still have my number.
Right.
Um,
Guessing you're gonna be able to
I
figure out who this is. Yeah.
yeah, I figured that you should I figured that you should see this equally as much as I should,
Hmm.
and I wanted to pass this on to you." It was like something simple like that.
Right.
And I never heard back.
Right.
I saw it as delivered.
Someone's
So
new number. They're like, who the fuck is it?
yeah, maybe she saw it, maybe she didn't. I have no clue. Um, wasn't blocked, so who knows? Maybe
You got
she'll
his
see this
name.
one day in 20 years and finally dig.
Or on Tuesday.
What? Probably not on Tuesday. Maybe she's listening. Who knows? That'd be
We
wild.
have 19 listeners every
We
episode.
do.
She could be one of them.
There's a small percentage chance, but it was just really interesting for me to go back on that roller coaster. Um, and I just felt obligated to be like, hey, I think that um I think this would be cool for you to see too.
Well, it sounds like you didn't even really go on the roller coaster all the way.
No, I don't think I did. Maybe I'll go back home and read it again. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was an interesting hard decision.
It's interesting to me that you didn't like you blocked out all that time. It seemed like you had the intention to go
Yeah,
in
yeah,
both feet, but then bailed out.
yeah. I was totally committed to going in both feet, and then once I got in it, it wasn't even like I consciously made the decisions to jump out of the pool. It was just like the water in the pool no longer existed. And I was still standing in the same spot that I anticipated I was standing in, but I just wasn't feeling anything that I expected to.
Do you think about that stuff regularly? Like the ex-girlfriend stuff that hurts?
I'd say I shut it down a lot.
It comes up and then you ignore it. It comes up and then you hit
It
the no
comes up
button.
in like, it doesn't come up as in like a 10 out of 10 or negative 10 out of 10 emotion. It comes in at like a 1 out of 10 or negative 1 out of 10. And then I don't give it the opportunity to become anything more than that.
Why not?
Because I see it as in the past and I have things in the future that I have to focus on.
Mhm.
And so I see it as a distraction from my ability to tackle future importance. And so I think a lot throughout the day. Like I think about a lot of different things throughout the day. And I share like 0.2% of them. Cause it's just like a lot of it's not even like regret. It's just like acknowledgement of existence.
Hmm.
Like this was in my past, this happened, and like I remember this day.
Hmm.
And then like before it becomes anything more than an acknowledgement of like +1 or -1, it becomes 0.
Interesting.
Like I don't dive into it at all.
Interesting.
And I don't know why.
I don't either because I think about that stuff every day. And usually I let it run.
Hmm.
And like I can cap it off. Usually I cap it off to other people. So the way I kind of manage it is I let it do what it wants in my head,
Mhm.
but then I just don't share it with other people. But I let it
Yeah.
run its course to myself because I mean, like I don't talk to people at work really, and at the bar most times I'm doing my own thing, and when I'm driving I'm on my own, so it's easy to just like turn off my podcast or the music or something, and then just
Yeah.
let it run.
Yeah.
Or at night. A
I've
lot
been
of
doing a
times,
lot of drives completely silent as of late.
yeah,
Like no music, no podcast,
I've
like
been through those.
dead silent not talking at all
Mhm.
and just, like, in your thoughts on the road.
Yeah.
It's
I
been very interesting.
I get I do those when I want to refeel those feelings, like, when I wanna kinda
Mhm.
take a tour of my memories, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I usually don't do it that frequently to think about new things and think about the future, but I I have recognized that I can't not think about this relationship, and so instead I'm trying to use it more so as a tool because I find that it really grounds me and makes me more empathetic to other people, because I can recognize in that whole situation, it sucked for everybody.
Yeah,
Like, nobody there came out unscathed, and everybody hurt,
yeah.
right? And it really when I think about it, like, I'm still working with Elizabeth on the board of directors for the Space Ghost right now, right? And it makes me understand in the moments that she snaps at me, like, she can yell or, like, say something, like, make a snarky comment or something, and the initial reaction is to snap back or defend yourself or whatever because that's what we would do, like, in our relationship. But thinking these thoughts every day grounds me and makes me understand and just say, like, "It's okay." It's like when a dog bites your hand at the pound
Mm,
shelter, and you're like, "I understand."
yeah, yeah. It's,
But
yeah, I think about another situation more recently too, and, I'll think about it, and then I immediately suppress it and ground it, and it's just like, I bury it in a hole. It's weird because it's like, I put it in a hole, but the dirt I cover with is see-through, and no matter how much dirt I pile on it, it's still see-through, but the act of me thinking that I'm piling dirt on it makes it go away just enough to where it doesn't impact my day-to-day. Like,
why don't you let it impact your day to day? On the drives. You're not doing anything else on the drives.
I just think it would fuck me up too much. I think it would get me into a frame of mind where I feel as though I have to do something about it because that's how I tackle all other problems in my life,
Interesting.
and I don't think that my perception of the solution would even come one fold, or sorry, 1% to the actual extent that a solution would take.
I
Uh,
think that might be the difference in situations because I don't have a solution in the future. I don't have
I
pending
don't think I do
actions.
either.
But
But the
I
problem is that
really
as soon as I make it a forefront of my mind, I cannot help but try to figure out a solution to it. But I don't think there is a solution.
right. I can't even
But
imagine a solution.
it would tax me because I know I wouldn't be able to avoid trying to find a solution. And that process would tax me so much that I would have let all of the other things I care about in my life dwindle.
You ever go back and read texts?
No, I used to, but I just can't do it anymore. I've done that too many times, and it's just been too hard.
I go back and read texts. I have voicemails saved. I have
Yeah,
letters.
it's too hard. Like, I even with that one, like, letter from 5 years ago, which, like, in retrospect, like, I don't even feel strongly about that anymore.
Right.
Like, even that
You
took
haven't
me
given
just
yourself
3
you
days.
haven't given yourself the chance to
Right.
do
I
something
didn't even
about
I
it.
didn't even give myself the opportunity to feel that.
Right.
And on top of that, it took me 3 days to just convince myself that I think I'm in the frame of mind to feel it, right? So it took me 3 days to convince myself that I potentially might be in the frame of mind to feel it, and then when I had all of the stars aligned to feel it, I still subconsciously chose to shut it down.
Right.
And so it's like for me to go back and read texts, when I can't even do that, I don't think I could do the next step in any way that's better than the first step, you know?
Yeah.
I used to go back and read texts and there's something about I just can't do it.
I think I go back because I don't wanna forget any of it. I don't go back and read it because I wish it had gone differently, or I am hoping that something happens in the future because I don't. It's kind of like when you do you like any sad movies?
Yeah,
Any tragedies?
yeah, Senna.
Senate.
Yeah,
I think about this like I think about Senna.
yeah. It's
When I think
given me
about
the
it,
opportunity to feel the pain.
yeah, it's the human experience, right?
Yeah,
And it's an incredible story, even though it's a tragedy.
yeah,
And at night when I can't sleep because I'm thinking about it, I've thought frequently that I should write a book. But the problem is I wake up and then I start going about my day and I'm preoccupied with other things and I don't have the time to dedicate to writing. But if it's 3 a.m. and I can't sleep, it's not a great time to get up and start writing either because then I'll just be up all night.
yeah,
But I guess that's what it is. It's I love good stories, and if you're a part of a story, a tragedy, you can kind of replay that movie in your head all the time or rewrite that story all the time.
yeah. I have documentation of like, you know, what I went through. I've gone back and read that once, part of it once.
Mhm.
Um, but it was again very similar to my letter of like 5 years, where like subconsciously, like I chose the act to go and read it to feel the moment, and subconsciously I immediately shut it down for me. I couldn't access it. I got in the pool with 2 feet, but all the water was gone, and I couldn't get the water back.
I bet you could if you tried.
I bet I could, but I think I was honestly too scared to try.
You should try it, see what
Yeah.
happens.
I have an
You might learn something.
regarding, this specific situation, which I know that you know about,
Yeah,
um, I have a text from yesterday I haven't opened yet
yeah.
for this exact reason. I don't like,
Because you don't wanna get in the pool?
I haven't even ooh, it's like, it's not even that the one text gets me in the pool, but the one text gives me the opportunity to scroll up, in a literal sense on the messages, right?
I feel like the fear of scrolling up is gonna stop you from doing it's like, I almost feel like it's better to scroll up and recognize that it's there and see it for what it is and process it than ignore that it's there at all.
Yeah. Hmm.
Homework for next week's podcast.
Yes, homework for next week's.
Do you wanna know how I know if I'm doing something too early or not?
Yeah.
Avoiding making decisions too early is kind of like decision insurance, or maybe like decision preparation is a better term for it.
Mhm.
Consider the O.J. Simpson jury, who only took 3 hours to deliberate whether or not O.J. Simpson was guilty for murdering Nicole Brown Simpson, while the whole world thought it would be weeks before they would receive a decision, right? They made that decision so fast, everyone for the rest of time questioned the credibility. Because if you make a decision too quickly and you don't give the credence and the time required to give it the critical thought, the decision is then cast into doubt, right?
Mm,
Even in the jurors' minds, right? It was a unanimous decision that he was innocent. But jurors think back and they think, well, there was a lot of external pressures that were influencing us, right? Like they weren't totally sound in their decisions. I mentioned Donald Trump, how he literally asks everyone everything because he wants to know how the choices will be perceived,
mm.
and wants to get others' perception. I also pretend that I'm being interviewed or confronted by someone who doesn't agree with my decision. It's a really easy way to figure out if I have responses prepared, which is a quick way to test whether I've properly weighed my choices. If I have no responses prepared, I might not have spent enough time thinking about it yet, right? Like if I'm grilled on a situation and I can't fire back answers quickly enough, right? Maybe I should reconsider. So if I sat down with, I don't know, um, Tyler, and he was like, "Hey, man, why are you doing real estate?" And I don't have a response ready for him, why the fuck am I doing real estate? Like, if someone asks you even like a big question like that, like, why haven't you XYZ and you don't have an answer, probably give more time thinking about it, right? So I guess kind of to bounce back, it's like, why didn't you jump all the way into the pool? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe give more time thinking about it. Um, but that's what I use very frequently is just asking myself questions as if I'm being confronted by someone. And figuring out if I have responses prepared. And then even if I think I've made my choice, I don't execute on it right away. I give it some time to breathe. I like to carry my decisions around with me throughout my daily life, pretending that I made the decision to see how it feels. And I might find that the choice doesn't suit me or that I have regrets that I haven't considered yet. Kind of like when you gamble on a multiple choice question on an exam, like there's 4 options and you have it down to 2, so you kind of like pick one. You pick the choice you think is right, but you're not going to submit your exam without finishing it and then going back through and reviewing it a couple times, right? I did that on the real estate exam. I picked the one that I thought was right, and then I went through, kind of like put it on the back burner and then put it on the front burner again, right? Um, but that's what I have for making sure that I'm not making a decision too early. Um, and
Um,
some other information. What?
yeah, I'm just laughing at the irony of uh, my main point is it's never too early.
To have a panic attack?
Right. Right. My main point was it's never too early to start making that hard decision.
Mhm.
But the whole back half of this section for me was it will always be too early.
For those decisions,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Which is like even just to like dive in emotionally, like that's at least the evidence that I've stacked so far is what tells me that.
Right.
Right. So it's just interesting. I was just laughing at the irony of that.
Right. Right. Well, I think we mentioned in the procrastination podcast that one of the reasons people will procrastinate is emotional avoidance, right?
Yeah.
And so if all of this stuff is pain that it carries
Right.
or joy, but even the joy is bittersweet, right? Because it's past. It's
Yeah.
over. It's not going to happen again, right? So even the joy that you feel when you're remembering these things is still bittersweet. Um, so it's still pain. So it's still procrastination to avoid that emotional confrontation, right?
Yeah. Hmm. Good podcast.
Yeah,
You have a dial in for us?
I do. It's by Unknown. Um, I was struggling to find one for this week, but I've got one that I think fits really well. It actually would have worked really well for the procrastination podcast, but I think it's better suited today, and I'll explain why. So the quote is, "Someone who procrastinates in their choosing will inevitably have their choice made for them by circumstance." It's a quote by Unknown. But essentially, if you wait too long to make a choice, the opportunity to choose will be taken away from you. So if you interview for a job and they offer you the job and you take too long thinking about it, ultimately, even if you decide that you want the job, they may have filled the position already.
Yeah.
Why are you laughing?
It's just that A is very true, and then B, it's funny how sometimes that duration of time you have to make that decision before the opportunity goes away, you never know how finite it is, and you never know how long it can be.
Right.
And that it's just interesting because it's like it could be a second or it could be 10 years,
Right.
and it could be anywhere in between. And there are some situations where you really never know either way.
Yeah.
There are some that are concrete or like that, okay, 1 to 2 weeks, right?
Right.
But there are some that can be so open-ended and complex that your decision could come down to the 1 second that matters, or it could come across 10 years of development.
And it can be undone.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can make a decision and then walk back on it later.
Yeah. Yeah. And so sometimes you can't.
Right.
Yeah. I had that experience with one of my ex-girlfriends that I cheated on.
Mhm.
Right. Like that was a decision that I can't walk back on,
Right.
you know.
When
Uh,
we broke up the first time, Emily told us it was because she didn't love me, but it was actually because she was afraid of commitment. And
yeah.
yes, he could walk back on that. And then the second time,
Yeah.
extenuating circumstances, but you can't walk that back.
Hmm.
All right. That's
Yeah.
all I got.
Well, thanks for listening. If you made it this far.
I've ruined your week. The next 3 days are going to be spent deep contemplative thought. You know what's wild?
No dynamic creative testing on Meta will happen in the next 2 days.
You know what's wild? I didn't take a piss once throughout this entire podcast.
Me either.
See a doctor.
You know what's also crazy? This is the first podcast I've never had a drink on the table.
It's weird. Why?
This was a weird ass
Late?
podcast.
It's
Honestly, I didn't want to pay $4 out of the vending machine, and I didn't bring one up.
That's fair. Yeah.
That
I
was
thought
fair.
about, I wanted a Red Bull because it's not as much caffeine as a Celsius. And I'm trying to stay awake a little bit later and a little bit later because the F1 race this weekend is in Australia and it's the first race of the season. So qualifying is at 1 a.m. Friday night, and then the race is at midnight Saturday night. So I'm either going to be up really late Friday night and then really late Saturday night, or just Saturday night. But in either case, I'm going to push my sleep schedule back a bit. So I had a Red Bull. It's fucking, what, 11 at night? Yeah. So,
Oh, yeah, wow.
bit of an out of cycle podcast, but glad we did it. And then we'll be back. I guess we'll be recording in like 2 weeks' time. Just about
Yeah.
a week and 5 days.
Yep.
All right. Sweet. Good stuff.
Have a good one.